In a world where monster hunters are hailed as heroes, Cheon Hasen has been treated like an outcast because of his abnormal looks. As if that wasn't bad enough, a pack of monsters attacks his neighborhood on the day he discovers he's dying from an unknown illness. With his sister's sacrifice, Hasen survives and somehow awakens to become a poisoner, a rare hunter with toxic healing abilities. But will his poisonous powers cure Hasen's illness and guarantee a normal life he's always dreamed of? To find out, let's start the story over. In the year 2032, the world changed dramatically overnight as superhumans. Demigods and messiahs appeared among the population. They had game-like abilities and gathered around to enter dungeons. These superpowered humans who hunted monsters for a living called themselves the Hunters. They fight beings from another dimension, which makes them wealthy but messes things up for normal people. As the monsters spill out from gates which connect Earth to the dungeons, people who have no power die helplessly. And until the Hunters arrive, it looks like this event would be the fall of Earth. However, saving people was just a byproduct of their true goal. They only want to hunt monsters, make money, and become stronger. No matter what their goals were, though, their impact was enough to make them the protagonists of the new world. But for our protagonist, there's no point to being a hero or having a new world when your own world is crashing down right in front of you. Cheon Hasen rides the bus in silence as he thinks about what the doctor just told him. He's terminally ill, and he may die at any time due to his body's addiction to poison. As he's trying to figure out what to make of his diagnosis, his phone buzzes with a call from his older sister. She asks him where he is, and he tells her that he's currently in Gaebongdong and on his way home. The reason she called is to let him know that she's doing overtime today, so she won't be home for a while. This isn't the first time she has done overtime, and Hasen thinks that she's overworking herself. But all her plans are for his sake, so she doesn't mind. Then she asks him what the doctor said about his illness, and Hasen thinks for a moment. Then he lies, telling her that the results showed that nothing much is wrong with him. She can't possibly find out that he is terminally ill. And worst of all, it's a disease that the doctor has never seen before. His whole body is addicted to poison, and it's a miracle that he's even alive at this point. While the miracle of his body enjoying poison is one thing, Hasen was more focused on the fact that the doctor was telling him that there is no possibility of him living. The older man couldn't do anything but bow his head and apologize. Hasen ends his call with his sister and goes back into despair. But once again, his thoughts are interrupted by a loud alarm going through everyone's phone at once. The people on the bus start to panic, and some wonder if they should try and evacuate as soon as possible. Hasen checks his phone and sees an emergency message saying that there has been a dual gate explosion in Gupadong and Gaebongdong. Then he has a late realization that Gaebongdong is exactly where he is right now. But that fact comes too late as he looks out the window of the bus and sees massive red eyes staring back at him. There's a monster frog outside the bus, and it pushes its tongue through the window, stabbing someone at the other end of the bus, killing him immediately. The man's wife and the rest of the people on the bus can only stare in shock as the man starts to slowly die from the poisonous tongue sticking out of his chest, and no one can really believe what is happening. There's a moment of silence as people's brains shifted into gear before absolute chaos broke through. Some start running out of the bus immediately, while others try to pull out the mourning woman who tries to stay beside her dead husband. Elsewhere, in an undisclosed company, Hasen's sister Songhwa finishes up the last of her work and prepares to take a break with one of her co-workers. The two women head to the break room with 2 hot beverages, and Songhwa's co-worker immediately starts the conversation by calling her amazing. People at her age should be dating and playing around, but instead, she's working overtime to pay for her sick brother's hospital fees. Songhwa smiles and doesn't agree with the woman's words. After all, he's her only family member, so she has to take care of him. The woman stays silent for a bit but laughs lightly, admiring their relationship. She doesn't notice that the smile has completely left Songhwa's face, but she notices when the cup falls from Songhwa's hand, splashing all over the floor. The shocked young woman is staring blankly at the news report detailing that gate explosion that happened in Gupadong and Gaebongdong. Her beloved brother is there right now, and he's in danger. Back in Gaebongdong, there's nothing but death and destruction in the area. Somehow, Hasen is alive, but not for long as one of the monsters has already caught him by the leg. Around him, anyone who could help has already been killed, and he doesn't have a lot of choices left. His phone buzzes crazily with texts from his worried sister, but he doesn't even have the chance to answer as the monster pulls him closer to death. In this situation, he's angry and powerless, but he doesn't want to sit still. Instead, he will try to die fighting in hopes that they give him some sort of medal of honor, which should definitely be a big help to his older sister. With no other choice, he grabs a nearby piece of glass, ignoring the fact that it cuts his hands, and prepares to give the last of his energy fighting this frog. Something like that is the last present he can give to his sister. He taunts the frog to attack, and it immediately obliges, lifting Hasen into the air and preparing to eat him whole. Hasen has no plans of becoming this beast's next meal and instead wants to show the beast what it feels like to be attacked. just like all the people it attacked as well. The frog releases Hasten, dropping him into its mouth, but he takes the opportunity to stab it in the eye with the glass shard. The frog shrieks in pain and thrashes around, throwing Hasten away and causing him to momentarily black out as he lands on the ground. When he opens his eyes again, confused about what happened, he sees the monster staring down at him menacingly. Instead of being a killer finishing move, it looks like his attack only served to make the beast even more angry. The poisonous frog wraps its large tongue around Hasten, this time making sure that he can't escape. Then it pulls him into its mouth, swallowing him in one gulp. With nothing else to hope on, all Hasten can do is pray that the association takes out the frog in the end. As Hasten slides down the frog's throat into its stomach, he wonders if this is really the end. As he accepts his death, all he can think about is his loving sister who gave her all to take care of him. Despite his deformities and his illness, she always loved him and did everything to protect him. The thought of the woman who gave her life to make him better makes him realize that he doesn't want to die. In that moment, as the thoughts of his survival fill his head, something changes in his body. Outside, the frog halts and starts to shiver in pain. Whatever is happening to Hasten is affecting it as well, and it can barely take the energy. Then in a burst of white light, the beast explodes, leaving Hasten fully intact as he falls to the floor. The news of the double gate opening has spread around, and great damages are to be expected as a result of the disaster. But instead of focusing on the true impact of the disaster, the news is instead praising Chairman Gu Gun-ai, who dispatched a special team to control the situation. This is the direct response of Glory Guild, which is the association in charge of the Gaebongdong district. Despite the bloodshed spreading through the streets, the news is only filled with praise for the Glory Guild and their ability to step up first to fight any disaster. As a woman runs through a bloody street filled with corpses, the chairman comes out to personally apologize to anyone who had been harmed by the incident. The woman is Songhwa, and as she risks her life running through the gore-filled streets, Chairman Gu Gun-ai claims that they are trying their best to take control of the situation and urges everyone to try and stand by in a safe place. Then he assures them all with a smile that the Glory Guild will always protect them. Hasten wakes up with a start, covered in the remains of the poison frog. The last thing he remembers is being swallowed by the monster, but somehow he's alive. As he gets up and starts to regain his senses, he hears someone familiar calling out his name. He immediately recognizes the voice as his older sister and calls back towards her. The voice is very faint, but it's definitely her voice. As he forces himself to stand up, he wonders why she came to somewhere so dangerous. He manages to get up and runs in the direction that he heard her calling from. Songhwa desperately calls out to him, but instead of her brother's voice, she hears a disgusting crunching sound coming from an alleyway close by. She decides to risk it and calls out for her brother in the tight space, but she's instead met with a tight space filled with monsters devouring a corpse. As she tries to step away slowly, her feet break a piece of glass behind her, causing all the monsters to notice her at the same time. She nervously starts to back away as the monsters close in on her before breaking out into a full sprint, running away from the deadly beasts as they chase her down. She runs with all her might down the empty street, but eventually reaches a dead end at a destroyed part of the road. She starts to cry, thinking about her brother and wondering if she was too late to save him. She tries to not give up hope, but the best she can do in her current situation is close her eyes and wait for the monsters to eat her up. Just before one manages to pounce on her, something comes out of nowhere and slaps the frog out of the air, sending it flying away. Songhwa turns towards the familiar voice and sees Hasten, bloodied and angry while holding a metal pipe in his hands. It looks like the Glory Guild isn't showing up anytime soon, so the people have to take matters into their own hands. He tells Songhwa to stay as far away from them as she can so he can come and save her. But usually, a normal human going up against monsters would be a nonsensical fight. However, Cheon Hasten felt like he could win this somehow. First of all, the small dark toads crowding around them were physically weak. Their main weapon is poison, and they are pretty average when it comes to physical strength. Secondly, he had gotten stronger for some reason. There were no physical changes in his body, but he just felt like he had grown more powerful. The third reason why he felt so confident is because of a small curiosity he had while he was passed out. The large toad that swallowed him was filled with poison, so he should have died too as soon as any part of the monster touched him. But instead of dying, he became stronger, and his injuries seemed to heal. That made Hasten certain that the toad's main form of attack wouldn't work on him. All these facts together made him certain that even though the fight wasn't fully in his favor, and there were a lot of toads around him, he could come out on top. This false confidence was enough to make Hasten let his guard down. A large monster, bigger than any of the ones he had seen so far, appears behind him and smacks him away with a single swat of its giant hand. He goes flying into a wall and is immediately knocked out. Through his tired and beaten eyes, he can barely see his sister about to get attacked by the same huge beast that sent him flying. He's lucky he didn't die, but Songhwa doesn't look like she'll be quite as lucky. He screams for her to get out of the way so he can come and save her, but his arm is certainly broken from the last attack. She can't bear to hear him in pain and tells him to stay back and run away. He doesn't listen and continues to shout for her to get away, but it's already too late as the monster slashes its arm towards her. In her last moments, she turns and apologizes to her brother, right as the giant claw comes down on her, splattering her blood all over the street. Someone like her who spent her days working hard for his sake shouldn't have to die like this. At least that's what he thought, but there's nothing he can do to change what has happened. Hasten falls to his knees in shock, wondering what in the world just happened and why his sister would fight for him. He's going to die anyways, and she had a long life ahead of her. As the rage builds up in his body, he starts to feel something building up around him. It looks like a giant red snake, and it came out from his body, and it's moving according to his will. He doesn't know what this thing is, but they body agree on one thing: the frog needs to die. The snake rushes past him and tears its way through the frog in one strike, killing it instantly. On top of a building, a woman watches the entire scene with a smile on her face. The kid managed to call on a red viper despite just awakening. She wonders if he might be able to do something that she has been wanting to see for a long time. To do that, though, he will first need to control his power. After hearing the loud sound from his summoning, all the monsters have started lurking towards him, and she's probably going to need to help him take out the giant toad walking towards him and his sister. Hyson gently places his injured sibling on the ground as an army of toads rush towards him. Despite the chaos, he has sworn that he won't let his sister die because of him. She gave her life for him, and he can't let that go to waste, no matter what. With his newfound resolve, he uses his hoodie to cover her and walks towards the monsters with his bare hands. Songhwa's breathing is shallow, so he can't waste any time defeating these monsters. All he has to do is hold out until the hunters arrive to save them. He stares up at the giant frog and prepares to go in for the kill, but before he can rush in, his body gives out on him unexpectedly. This must be a side effect of the snake he summoned, and he can barely move anymore. He can barely summon the strength to fight anymore as a large monster tongue rushes towards him, looking to kill him in one attack. Just before the strike can hit him, someone steps up and blocks the attack with one hand. As she holds the huge frog tongue back from killing him, she explains that he overused his strength to take out the smaller beasts, and that has caused his body to give out. However, he still managed to destroy a black ether monster with a single move, which impressed her at least. Then she introduces herself as Kirill, and although she has a lot to say to him, she has to clean up the situation around them first. Then with incredible strength, she grabs Hasten by the collar and tosses him like a rag doll away from danger. She tells him to go and wait with his sister while she turns to face the large group of monsters approaching her, and she's immediately met with a huge attack from the giant toad. However, she's just too fast for it to be able to catch her. Kirill leaps onto the toad's arm and gets right up in its face, ready to dish out a deadly attack. It responds by shooting out its tongue towards her, looking to swat her out of the sky, but she dodges it so fast that it almost looks like she teleported. Then she reappears right above it, charging up a mega punch that crushes the monster so hard that it explodes in a burst of guts and gore. Hyson watches in awe as she shows off the strength of an S-rank hunter. If he had even half of that strength, then his older sister wouldn't have been hurt. His thoughts are broken as the woman reappears behind him and asks what he's thinking so hard about. He lies that there's nothing wrong, and Kirill smiles lightly at him before telling him that his sister is fine. That snaps him out of his thoughts, and he stares at her in shock as she continues talking. If Kirill had arrived just a little later and didn't know how to heal, it would have been dangerous for her. But thankfully, she got to Songhwa just in time to save her. Hearing that his sister could live, especially after he had almost given up, causes him to break down in tears. He turns around and realizes that he couldn't see any trace of Songhwa's wounds. Somehow, this woman who appeared out of nowhere had managed to save his family. As he cries in joy, the woman tells him that it's too early for him to be happy. After all, he's in the same state, and he keeps acting like he's about to drop dead. For now, though, she assures him that he has a long way to go before he can die. Hasten asks her what she means, and she gives him a gentle smile before assuring him that he can also live. She'll tell him the details after she gets rid of the remaining monsters swarming around them. As she turns to leave, Hasten calls for her to wait a moment. He wants to know if he can truly become as strong as her, now that she has promised him that he can live. He doesn't want to be tossed around by others anymore, and he wants to grow into someone who can protect. His words cause Kirill to smile, and as a reward, she decided to show him something cool. She turns towards the raging stampede of monsters and prepares a special technique, which is the only technique she has with a name attached to it. A large black cloud starts to form in her hand, and a poisonous mist gathers around her as she calls its name, Poison Rain. Then the cloud shoots a beam of light into the sky, causing the clouds above them to swirl and change to a destructive-looking purple color. As the environment around them changes to her will, She tells him that this is the level he must aspire to reach if he wants her to consider him strong. Then it begins to rain, but it isn't normal rain. As each drop falls from the sky, every monster it touches starts to cry out in pain and melt into nothing. As the rain pierces the monsters and annihilates them, Hasten realizes that hunters really are terrifyingly strong. Then Kirill turns to him and answers his question from earlier. She promises him that he will become the strongest hunter in the world. Much later, the two return back to Hasten's house where Kirill seems to be trying out a very strange exercise on her new student. For some reason, she's holding him upside down by his ankle, while also spawning several large poison daggers around them. Hasten nervously asks if she is certain that he's going to survive, when this is her idea of training him. Kirill eventually puts him down and bursts out into laughter while he blushes in embarrassment. He really thought he was going to die just then, but Kirill can't stop herself from laughing. She was never planning to kill him, but instead she wants to plant something called black ether in him. Haisen has clearly never heard of it, so Kirill starts her explanation by asking if he knows about poisoners. They are quite famous after all. In the past, they were one of the top classes of power in the world of hunters. But after a certain incident, they all vanished from the public, and after that, they became hated by the public and known as humanity's betrayers. And Kirill, his mentor, is one of the renowned villainous poisoners. Hasten rushes to apologize, but she tells him that it's fine. Besides, it's not like he was wrong about anything he said. In fact, he doesn't even seem scared by the fact that the person standing in front of him is one of humanity's betrayers. Hasten has no reason to be scared since she saved him and his sister. Besides, with her level of power, he had a feeling that she wasn't a normal hunter anyways. Kirill confirms that poisoners indeed are not normal. A better description of them would be special. They have extraordinary abilities that show up as soon as they awaken. The death rate for a hunter in their awakening phase is 1%, meaning that it is very rare. For poisoners, on the other hand, most of them die while awakening, and the cause is always the same. Poisoners live their lives with poison in their bodies, and the poison gets worse each day. So when the poison gets strong enough that they can't handle it, their power eats away at them. Hasten realizes that those symptoms sound very similar to him. Kirill laughs and confirms that all the pain he went through was a symptom of his own awakening, and now he has become a poisoner. Before he can even process his thoughts, Kirill drags him out of the house. She still has a lot of things to explain, so they have to head out for a practical demonstration. She takes him to the top of a skyscraper and stands along the edge. Then she asks him if he knows how poisoners survive while having large amounts of poison in their systems. The answer is that they treat the poison in their bodies at all times. With that basic explanation done, she takes a syringe filled with poison and throws it into his chest, injecting it into his body. A poisoner's healing abilities exceed what a normal person can ever imagine. Whether they are sleeping, eating, and even right now as they are talking, their healing powers are activated and constantly purifying the poison in their systems. Because of that, however, they can't completely get rid of the poison, since the purified poison is the source of their energy, and it is known as black ether. Hasten nervously takes the poisoned syringe from his chest and asks if this is really safe. She assures him that it's not just safe, it's also a gift to him since she is now his student. Now the next step is figuring out what skills he needs to learn, and she decides on mobility. And what better skill to teach him than one of the most basic self-skills named poison steps. She starts trying to teach him how to make use of the new skill, but Hasten interrupts with a question of his own. She once said that poison rain was the only skill with a name, but now she's giving a bunch of other skills with names as well. That causes Kirill to freeze in embarrassment. Then she leaps off to the nearest building to escape the question. She's definitely an amazing person, but somehow she's also incredibly thick-skinned. After an hour of her jumping around from building to building, Hasten sighs and gives up on being able to do something as amazing as that in the first place. His thoughts of despair cause her to return from her jumping spree and come back to his side. It's pretty unreasonable for him to give up without trying, since he will never know whether or not he can do something. Haisen tells her that she doesn't know since she is already strong. He, on the other hand, was called multiple horrible insults all throughout his life for things he could not control. Because of that, he's scared of trying, and even though that might sound like an excuse, it's his reason for now pushing forward. Kirill stares at him for a moment with an unusually serious expression, then comes to a decision. Her style of teaching was wrong, and she needs to change her approach to the whole thing. She warns him that things will be harder for him from now on, then grabs him by the collar again. What's most important for him to learn are his senses. If he focuses all his senses on the bottom of his feet, then he can explode those senses swirling there, which will cause him to jump away with explosive power. With that simple explanation, she holds him by his collar at the edge of the skyscraper. Then without warning, she drops him from the side, causing him to go into a freefall. Then she leaves him with the wonderful nugget of advice that if he doesn't succeed, then he will die. As he falls to his death, Kirill repeats her advice, telling him to step on the tower wall and jump onto the opposite building. That's easier said than done, but if he doesn't do something soon, then he's definitely going to die. For now, he has to at least try. Haesen starts by focusing all his power and pushing all his senses to the bottom of his feet. As he falls, the harsh words of his peers fill his head, and he uses them as motivation to channel his power. Right now, it is unreasonable to give up without trying. Then with a simple push, he plants his feet on the wall of the tower and pushes off, flying away unexpectedly. As he soars through the sky, he can barely believe that he actually managed to pull it off. But all that aside, how is he supposed to land? Luckily, Kirill appears beside him and stretches out her hand. He said it would be impossible, but now he sees that it's easier than he thought. As they both fall through the sky, she pulls him in close for a hug and assures him that things are easier when he's prepared to die for it. Their training continues after they land as Kirill stares at him with a glare so sharp, Haesen can almost feel it cutting through him. Then things get even more intense as she spreads his eye open and brings her face dangerously close to his. He tries to scream as Kirill transfers some sort of device lens from her eye to his, all while smiling menacingly. With the transfer, complete with a little bit of physical assault and trauma added, Kirill explains that the device she gave him is a piece of cutting-edge equipment that hunters use. Although this particular prototype is much more advanced than anything hunters from the Glory Guild have ever seen, there are several types of tools that hunters use. There's attack-type weapons, gathering-type tools, and storage-type equipment. This one is known as a lens type, which is far superior to the normal ones. While Haesen appreciates the item, there just had to be a gentler way to perform the transfer, right? But the fact that she's in such a rush makes Haesen think that she is about to leave. And he is completely right about that. She may not look like it, but she's currently being chased by others, and things will be dangerous if she stays in one spot for too long. In fact, with how long she has stuck around him, it's already kinda dangerous as it is. With their separation imminent, she pats his head lightly and tells him to go and look for Dr. Jin. He's a genius, and also her partner, and he should be able to explain everything he is confused about now. The lens device will tell him the doctor's location, so all he has to do is follow it to where it leads. Finally, she leaves him with one last gift, a ball surrounded by dangerous-looking dark energy. With that, she has given him everything she can and taught him everything she wanted to. With how kind and gentle she is, Haesen wonders why she's being treated like some kind of criminal. Before she leaves, he calls out to her, still wondering why she's going this far to help him. This is the first time that he has been cared for so much by someone other than his sister, and he feels more than thankful. That has proven to him that she's not an evil person, and because of that, he wants to give his all to help her as well. Despite his resolve to help her with even the toughest of work, she declines his offer. He's not at a level where he can be of any help to her, so for now he has to focus on becoming stronger. He has to become so strong that he will never despair no matter how powerful his enemies are. Once he's strong enough to protect everyone, then he can help her. He promises her that he will grow that strong, and she praises him for his resolute response. From his strong expression, she can tell that she won't need to be worried about him anymore. With that final conversation, she leaps off the building, bidding him farewell. Thanks to her, in his life where he had nothing, he finally has a goal. The next day, the news is filled with reports of the devastation that happened in Gaebongdong. The richer and more privileged Gupadong was successfully defended, but the Glory Guild completely ignored Gaebongdong. Naturally, there was a sharp increase in criticism, and the stories of their negligence went viral on the internet. Thousands of comments ranging from curses to grief sprung up all over the place, and as countless arguments of the pros and cons took place over a few days, some people started to pop up who support the Glory Guild. All of a sudden, all the criticism disappeared, and they were being praised as heroes. No one is more upset about that than Haesen as he dresses up to head out. After all, he was personally affected by the incident and almost lost his life after everything. But there's a limit to how much one person can take before they get angry. So instead of focusing on that, he heads out towards the location that his lens directs him to, leaving a note behind for his sister, telling her that he will be back in just a few days. As he walks on to his location, he takes a moment to look at the orb that Kirill gave him. It looks like a core, and it must have belonged to the giant toad, but he has no idea what to do with it. She told him that he should hold it in his hands and remember how it felt to use poison steps. And almost immediately, he starts to notice something happening. The core starts getting absorbed into his body, and a notification window appears from the lens device, showing how much of the core he has absorbed. Eventually, he manages to absorb the entire thing, and the status window shows how much black ether he managed to absorb. The amount is represented by a value called BA, and it shows that the amount in his body has increased from 1 to 1.5 BA. If he keeps absorbing this, maybe he can get stronger, but right now he doesn't know how strong his body currently is. The lens responds by informing him that he is currently at the level of an E-rank knight, but if he continues to absorb black ether and surpass a certain limit, then he will eventually possess the abilities of an S-rank knight. It looks like Kirill wasn't bluffing when she said that he can become the strongest hunter in the world. Before he can think more on the new pieces of information he has learnt, he reaches a checkpoint and notices an argument going on right beside it. A man yells at a frightened-looking woman who is holding an injured child. It looks like she's trying to get to a hospital, but a checkpoint suddenly appeared without any warnings. She argues with the man as the kid shivers in her hands, but that only causes the man to get louder and threaten her with violence. That causes the kid to start crying as the man continues yelling at them, throwing in a few insults, telling and calling them beggars despite the situation. That's too much for Hasten to take, and he eventually steps in to stop the conversation. He calls the man disgusting for acting high and mighty in a situation like this, when these same officials were nowhere to be found when the gate initially burst out. The man turns his anger towards our protagonist as he walks up to them with a calm stride. It's hilarious to him that these same people who weren't there when things were truly dangerous are suddenly coming in and trying to take control of the situation. The angry man takes out his bat and asks Hasten if he knows who exactly he's talking to. But with the large badge on the man's vest, it's impossible for anyone to not recognize him. Everyone in Korea knows the pattern on the man's shirt, and they all know it as the symbol of the Glory Guild. The man steps up toward Hasten, towering over him and trying to intimidate him. It's even worse that he's saying all these things despite knowing who they are. Hasten doesn't back down though, and encourages the man to try and hit him. This will be the first fight he has ever tried to pick since he awakened, and as the man raises his hand to teach our protagonist a lesson, Hasten realizes that he's scared. But just because he's scared doesn't mean that he's going to hide when he needs to fight. He catches the bat right as the man swings it towards his face and breaks it easily in his hands. That causes the man to realize that he has severely screwed up. Cheon Hasten had never exercised before, and as he drew in a punch, he had an unstable posture and irregular breathing. The punch he threw was definitely one thrown by a rookie with no fighting experience, but the body of a metahuman is on a different level compared to normal people, and even with his weak form, he was still strong enough to throw a punch that knocked the man out instantly. As he lays on the ground, the man starts to whimper lamely for help. Hasten can't help but mock him for whining after a single punch despite acting so tough earlier. When the gates initially burst out, people also cried for help, but no one came to save them. They kept waiting, believing that the Glory Guild would come and help them, but they never came. Hasten soon realizes that he's wasting his breath on someone who isn't listening and turns to leave. The woman can't help but watch him in awe as he passed through the gate, completely unfazed by what just happened. After a long stretch of traveling, Hasten finally reaches the spot that his lens device has been directing him to. All that's there is a simple phone booth, and it's in such a secluded area that it's hard to imagine anyone uses it. Hasten picks up the receiver and puts it to his ear, but it looks like it's not even functioning. Then he presses a button hidden underneath the receiver, and the booth immediately starts shrieking a loud sound. Then a hatch opens up under his feet, and he falls through, landing violently on the floor of a weird white room. If he wasn't a metahuman, then the fall would definitely have killed him. But his troubles haven't ended just yet. He looks around the room and notices a closed door to his left. That should be the door he will use to enter, but he can't figure out where exactly he should go. One thing is for certain, however, and that is the fact that this Dr. Jin is no ordinary person. He tries to use his hand to get up from the ground, but it splashes in some sort of unknown liquid. He brings his hand up to his face and realizes that the liquid is actually blood. Before he can even wonder if he somehow came to the wrong place, a loud alarm rings out all around him. It warns that it's changing the system to base defense mode as several guns pop out from the ceiling and all aim at him. Hasten panics for a second and the guns shoot out a strange poisonous gas, filling the entire room and causing him to cover his nose. He wonders why Dr. Jin is doing this since he's supposed to be close friends with Kirill. His mind races as he accidentally inhales some of the poison gas, but then he remembers that he is a poisoner, and poison doesn't work on him. In fact, it feels refreshing to breathe in the toxic fumes. Then he hears the footsteps of someone approaching the room he's in. On the other side of the door, a man wearing a face mask glances into the poison-filled room. Whoever is in there should be dead by now, and he opens the door to check in on the results. As soon as he enters the room, Haisen tackles him to the ground and gets on top of him, ready to beat the unknown man to a pulp. But before he can even start the fight, he realizes that the man has already passed out from just that initial attack. Later on, Haisen explains to the man how he got there. He gets an understanding of the situation now that he knows that Kirill helped him, but other than that, he's more concerned about the fact that Haisen tied him up. The ropes are really tight and he's starting to suffocate. Haisen isn't convinced yet that the doctor won't try something as soon as he's released, but Dr. Jin assures him that everything will be all right. First of all, those traps were designed specifically to kill non-poisoners. Anyone else would have died as soon as they inhaled the gas. Hasten is not impressed and tells the larger man to stop joking around, but he's really not joking. Firstly, since the place is set up so that normal people can't enter, the only people that can reach his lab are Hunters and Kirill. He is a pretty capable scientist, so naturally a lot of people needed his help. It was pretty tough back when he was younger, but he managed to endure through the hard days. Even with how important he was as a scientist and a doctor, there were people who were after him because of his achievements. Assassins from other countries, people from dubious organizations, and even hunters from the association were after his life. There were probably reasons that people were after him, probably because of his money or his technical skills. At first, he tried to struggle and survive through everything, but as time went by, it got harder to trust others. Even people sent to protect him would try and end his life. After a while, for his own safety, he stopped meeting people and the paranoia got to him. He had to retreat to this safe space and build that trap room to stop people from coming after him. No blood in that room is clean, and everyone there has come looking for something horrible. Hasten sighs, and although he's still suspicious of the man, he releases him from the rope. The man has been nice to him so far, so there's no reason to be overly hostile. Dr. Jin also trusts him because he is someone that Kirill sent. Since he trusts Kirill, then he can trust Hasten. Back then, when he was at the lowest point in his life and about to die, the girl came up to him with an umbrella and tried to help him. And from what he remembers of Kirill, this kid is strikingly similar to her, even down to the spots that littered their skin. It's almost funny to him that the teacher and the student are so similar. Hasten doesn't see it though and thinks that the only thing similar between them is the fact that they are both poisoners. Dr. Jin tells him that they are both similar in the way they do whatever they want, and he reveals that Kirill also had the same dark purple spots when she was younger. That shocks Hasten since Kirill is so pretty as he knows her now. Dr. Jin sighs and realizes that it'll be faster for both of them if he just explains the situation rather than idly talking. They both start walking towards another part of the lab, and the doctor asks our protagonist what he thinks about the poison in his body. He doesn't know much about it, so the doctor explains that a drop of his poisonous blood is strong enough to kill an A-rank knight. It's so powerful that no chemical weapon ever produced can compare to him. Hasten knows that when a hunter becomes an A-rank, most attacks are usually useless against them, yet just a single drop of his blood is enough to kill someone so powerful. Dr. Jin brings him out of his musing and tells him that even though he is powerful, that ability is useless if it can't be controlled. So for now, he will have to train before he becomes a disaster himself. With that, Dr. Jin shows him to a room filled with training equipment and materials to use and get stronger. His scars are a symptom that shows that he is unable to control his poison. So for now, he has to gain a stronger control over his poison, which will allow them to naturally disappear. The doctor assures Haesun that he is the one who trained Kirill, so he will become unrecognizably different by the time he's done with their regimen. With the explanation done, Dr. Jin goes straight to business and tells him to start working. As Haesun works to improve himself, Dr. Jin provides motivation, forcing him not to slack off, and increasing the intensity of his workouts when he sees it necessary. They've only been working together for a short period of time, but Haesun is already lifting weights that could cripple a normal man. By the 7th day of his training with Dr. Jin, a lot of changes had already taken place. Firstly, the doctor had finally taken off his gas mask, which probably meant he trusts our protagonist. The first time he saw the older man without his mask, Haesun almost couldn't recognize him. The second change is that his sister woke up, and she panicked as soon as she woke up and didn't see him around. Obviously, she scolded him quite a bit for practically deserting her and running off to some unknown place. But even with that, she still decided to trust him. The third change is a new device built to help him in his growth as a hunter. One day, Dr. Jin came to him and handed him a new kind of device. It has 3 devices, including an improved version of the one that Kirill gave him. Dr. Jin designed and developed this amazing tool in just 3 days. And finally, the biggest change would be our protagonist himself. There were a lot of changes that occurred in his body after the training. Not only were his spots not as dark anymore, but he had also become incredibly muscular over a short period of time. The change happened so rapidly that it shocked both him and Dr. Jin. He grew a good body and a handsome face overnight, and ended up looking so good-looking that Dr. Jin is almost jealous. As their training continues, Haesun decides to ask the doctor if he's bored of being in the underground bunker. After all, he has been alone down there for who knows how long, and it's a miracle that he has endured it all for so long. Dr. Jin corrects him by saying that he isn't actually alone. He has a little partner who has been hanging out on Haesun's shoulder this whole time. Our protagonist glances down at his shoulder to check, and for the first time, he notices a little dragon sleeping on his shoulder. The little guy's name is Pori, and he's a harmless, friendly poisoner monster. Even if someone gets bitten by the little dragon, they only end up feeling a slight itch. It also has the ability to absorb poison from its owner, and has been stuck to Haesun's shoulder for 2 days now. Haesun has been going through several training sessions, and even with his newly heightened senses, he still didn't notice the creature resting on his shoulder. That is because Pori has an ability to become invisible. Stealth is one of the rarest abilities that is even common among the strongest espers. That alone means that Pori isn't normal at all. Hasten doesn't have any time to think about it though, and the doctor orders him to get back to his training. Elsewhere, a secretary reports his findings to his supervisor at the Glory Guild headquarters. The Glory Guild chairman Gugun-ai gives appropriate orders after listening to the report, but something in particular catches his attention about the entire thing. He keeps on hearing about the Gaebongdong incident, and it's making him sick. He would rather not have to hear about such troublesome things again. The secretary nervously promises to make the reports disappear after some forceful persuasion by the chairman, and then prepares to leave. Gugun-ai calls him back and asks him where someone named Maria is. The secretary gets even more nervous and seems scared to reveal the answer, and that tells the chairman everything he needs to know. She shut herself in the healing room again. His suspicions are right, and Maria is indeed sitting in there, crying quietly to herself as she repeatedly slashes at her forearms while muttering apologizes to no one in particular. The healing room is one of Glory Guild's many secrets, and it's Maria's exclusive room for endless self-harming. She goes down there when she needs to torture herself due to her crippling sense of guilt for not being able to protect everyone. Most of her injuries would have been fatal if it were anyone else. However, Maria's healing ability is so powerful that she is able to regenerate any wound she gets as soon as she is injured. As she sits on the ground crying, the chairman tries to console her by telling her that there is nothing that they could have done to save those who died. Maria doesn't listen though, and reminds him that over 500 innocent people lost their lives. They have no right to say they have done their best when so many people were sacrificed. Gugun-ai sighs and places his head in his palm. They have had this conversation multiple times at this point, and he always reminds her that there is nothing they could have done differently. She asks him if things would have been different if she had gone along with the rescue team. They could have split into teams of 2, and even while reaching the site late, they could have saved at least one more person. The thought of their failure causes her to burst out in tears again, and Gugun-ai is forced to remind her that the monster that appeared in Gaebongdong was a disaster. Right now, they have no idea who killed it so easily, but the truth is that they would have struggled to fight it on their own. The thought of that causes Gugun-ai to cry as a tear falls down his cheek. After all, he was the one calling the shots, so if anything, that disaster was his fault. Maria freezes in shock as the chairman seems to break down into tears of his own and blames himself solely for the disaster. At least that's what she thinks is happening. In truth, this is the same routine he has to go through every time Maria goes off the deep end, and he's getting sick of it. His plan works though, and Maria goes from blaming herself to consoling him immediately. As soon as he notices her mood change, he offers to take her to the next hunter examination location. After all, they need to recruit more talents, and bringing in more people means that they will have a chance to save more innocent lives. Maria momentarily cheers up, and the chairman takes the opportunity to think of something else that has been bothering him. The person that defeated the monster in Gaebongdong is incredibly strong, and he has to find out who it was. Back in Dr. Jin's lab, Hasten works on doing more strength training. The doctor takes the opportunity to ask him what he intends to do after his training is over. The answer is obvious and expected, and Hasten reveals that he plans to become a hunter. And instead of becoming a knight, he actually plans to become a healer. Ironically, his goals match with the man that caused his life to be in danger in the first place, Gugun-ai also believes that the world needs more talented healers. Hasten wants to save more lives while Gugun-ai is more focused on the fact that good healers are rare, and his guild needs them in case his members get injured in fights. Because of that, the two of them are likely to clash at the next hunter's examination location. With his goals set and his training complete, the time eventually comes for Hasten to bid Dr. Jin farewell. The two men shake hands and the doctor reveals that he even got a little attached to his subordinate in such a short period of time. Then he reveals that Pori will be going with him as well, and the two exchange one last goodbye as the doctor tells the little dragon to take care of Hasten. As soon as he returns home, he immediately meets his very angry sister. She puts him in a headlock out of spite and pulls his ear as he tries desperately to explain himself. Hasten eventually gets a chance to explain himself, and although his sister is still not happy, she's not as angry as she was before. However, she's doubtful of the intentions of the person that supposedly saved him. Her age is uncertain, and he has no idea who or what she's even associated with. Kirill might not even be her real name. Normal hunters are usually expected to help civilians, but Kirill went above and beyond, and it seems like she has some hidden motives of her own. Despite his sister's reservations, Hasten defends his mentor, and he's sure that she's not a bad person. Songhwa gives him the last bit of advice and tells him that a time might come when he needs to pay back the help that she had given him. And when that time comes, he might not even be able to handle it. But putting that aside, the more important discussion is the fact that he wants to become a hunter. Hasten nervously looks away, expecting her to be against it, But surprisingly, she tells him to go for it. There's no reason for her to stop him, and if it's something that he wants to do, then she will support him. Hasten bows his head in appreciation. This is how Songhwa has always been after all. He doesn't want anything like what happened in Gaebongdong to happen again. He wants to become a hunter so he can have the chance to save people just like he was saved. Despite the dangers, Songhwa eagerly supports his dream and assures him that he will be a hunter who is greater than everyone else. Haisen finds it funny that the two people who he trusts the most have told him the exact same thing. Now with her blessing to take the exam, he casually tells her that the registration fee is 50 million won. All of a sudden, his sister isn't as supportive of him taking the exam. It might be better for him to work in a small factory. Hasten assures her that he already has a way to get the money, and despite what she thinks, he has no plans of selling an organ. His plan instead is to enter a place that hunters are known to frequent regularly. The dungeons that appear randomly in the world are not only filled with monsters, but they also have treasures that can make people's dreams come true. This particular dungeon is a poison dungeon, and it's one of the most infamous types of dungeons. It's so toxic that restrictions have been placed around it in hopes of controlling the spread of poison. The problem, however, is that the further the restriction zone goes, the more problems are likely to pop up. But now that he's right in front of the gate, there's no turning back. Hasten takes a deep breath and dives into the swirling purple gate. On the other side, he's met with a whole new world. It's so fascinating that it almost looks like he's in a video game. And as he expected, he can also feel the thick poison in the air. Other hunters wouldn't even be able to breathe in the area. But that doesn't concern him. For now, his main focus is finding a certain plant that he can sell to make the money needed for the exam. As he walks through the toxic environment, he eventually meets his first obstacle. A poisonous, deadly Komodo dragon with a physical level of E and a difficulty level of 2 stars. It also has another level of D. That other level refers to all other types of attack abilities like telekinesis and elemental abilities. In other words, this monster has a difficulty of 2 stars because of its deadly poison. And since he doesn't have to worry about the poison, Haisen should be able to fight it easily. That should be the case, but instead of confidence, he's instead paralyzed with fear. His hands are shaking rapidly, and nothing he is doing can calm him down. Every instinct in his body tells him to run, and the trauma of the Gaebongdong incident springs to the front of his mind. Then in the moments where it seems like he can barely think, Pori appears in front of him, and the little dragon looks at its master in concern. That is enough to drag him out of his frozen state, and he's able to regain control of his mind. Now that he has gotten himself together, he searches his pockets for the device that the doctor gave him. As he digs through his pockets, the monsters eventually notice him and start coming out of the bushes. He counts up to 3 rushing towards him, and they just keep coming. Luckily, he finds it just in time, and that's enough to give him enough confidence to believe that he can kill them no matter how many there are. He remembers when he first got the device. The doctor explained to him that it's a weapon that will take whatever shape he requires at the moment. All he has to do is hold it in his hand and shout for it to move. With that memory in mind, he holds it close and tells it to move. The functionalities of the box are endless, and it reacts to his ether to increase its output. The device's name is Exa, and as it shifts its shape and turns into a more formidable weapon, Hasten can't help but marvel at the device created by the world's most genius scientist, Dr. Jin. Exa turns into a sharp dagger, and as he holds the weapon, Hasten is even more sure that he's not going to go down without a fight. As the monsters charge at him through the bushes, Hasten activates the first ability that his mentor taught him. He raises his hand and calls for poison rain, right as one of the deadly Komodos prepares to take a bite out of him. The toxic liquid falls from the sky, and just one drop is enough to cause the Komodo closest to him to explode. The rest of them don't even have time to process what happened before they too get destroyed by the toxic rain. As Hasten walks through the field of scattered monster body parts, he's more concerned about how his sister will react to the blood on his shirt than the monsters in the forest. But it's all worth it as he absorbs the black ether from the dead monsters. This place is practically a buffet for him with how much ether is in the area. As he runs over to the next dead monster, he realizes that a dungeon like this was practically made for him. After absorbing from the last corpse, that brings the total black ether he has absorbed to 50 BA. If he keeps going, he might be able to collect up to 300 BA before heading home. Hasten has grown so overpowered in such a short amount of time that he can barely believe it. Ether usually heavily shifts depending on the user's power, but this is way too powerful. The wounds he managed to inflict on the Komodos were just small cuts, but they all died before they could even resist. That makes Exa a weapon capable of shooting his enemies. With his current growth, he might have even reached the strongest class and outpaced Kirill. In his excitement, he hurriedly opens up his status window to check just how much he has grown. He doesn't expect an S rank, but just B or an A would be satisfactory. Instead, his new and improved lens device named V1 tells him that he is currently an E class in physical strength with an S rating in healing skills. That's a bit dissatisfying, but it doesn't matter that he's just an E class. He plans to become a healer anyways. At least that's what he says to try and feel better. In truth, he's so disappointed that he starts contemplating if he should head home. He couldn't even find the special flower he came here for in the first place. As he makes his next plans, a rush of killing intent causes him to pause in his tracks. He turns towards where the feeling is coming from, ready to take on something fierce. He can tell just from the aura of whatever is coming that this monster is on a whole different level to the monsters he fought earlier. Out from the darkness of the forest, a deadly-looking polluted hyena makes its way towards him. He doesn't even need V1's analysis to tell that this thing is way out of his league in terms of physical capability. It has a physical level of C and another level of B. The hyena has to be the boss of the dungeon, and even though Hasten's poison is stronger, the physical level is 2 ranks above his. The gap in strength between them is way too much to cross, but even if it's much more powerful, there's still a chance that he might be able to take it out. The monster doesn't waste any time and starts its attack. It sprints towards Hasten's blind spot, then appears behind him faster than he can think to defend himself. In a matter of seconds, the hyena leaves a deadly slash on his arm, forcing him to the ground immediately. Hasten starts to wonder if this is where he will die. The hyena is much more powerful than him, and he couldn't follow his movements at all. But he can't just give up here. There's no way he would die after already beating death so many times before. He forces himself back onto his field, and notices that the hyena isn't attacking anymore. It's sitting still and patiently waiting for the poison to spread through his body with a smile on its face. That makes Hasten even angrier, but it also gives him a chance to win. The hyena's cockiness will end up being what kills it. Our protagonist taunts the beast to come in for another attack, and it rushes in to fight. Hasten first has to get rid of its stamina, then he just has to hope that his high-level healing ability is stronger than any damage the hyena manages to inflict. Every poisoner uses their abundant healing power to control the poison in their body. But when the poison is perfectly controlled, then there is no need for healing. That doesn't mean that the healing just disappears. It can be used to heal other injuries, which makes poisoners one of the best healers out there. Dr. Jin taught him that fact, and now he has to use it here to defend himself. The hyena takes a huge chomp out of his arm, and he swings his dagger at it, slapping it away. Now that he has a plan, he can use the third device that Dr. Jin gave him as a trump card in this very situation. The circulator allows him to better control the flow of poison in his body, which means that he will be able to heal faster and better. Thanks to this, his arm heals up immediately, and he's ready to start round 2. The two clash in the poison-filled field, and somehow he's able to keep up with the monster's rapid movements. However, that isn't enough to stop him from repeatedly getting injured. As he heals up his injuries again, he can see that the hyena isn't even too worried. It looks like there is no end to this fight after all, and he might have even underestimated a level C physical ability too much. They have been fighting for an hour, and the hyena shows no signs of getting tired. The beast leaps towards him again, and he has to use poison steps to avoid being sliced in two. Every attack pierces into him, and this whole time, Hasten hasn't been able to give a proper hit. Even though things have been looking hopeless, he's somehow getting used to the beast's movements. It's slow and unfair, but the fight isn't as impossible as when they first started. The hyena is way too arrogant, but the reason is that it knows how important spirit is in a fight. If Hasten shows weakness, he will be eaten alive immediately. So he has to keep giving it his all, even as the hyena slams its body into his and sends him flying through a forest of trees. He can't stop getting back up and showing his will to fight. He's not holding up well, and the hyena is acting too carefree as it waits for him to pick himself back up. And he can tell that it's not even giving its all in this fight. He remembers what Kirill once told him, to not despair no matter how strong the enemies in his way are. If someone as strong as Kirill was to get scared in the face of an enemy, then that enemy must be indescribably strong. He made Kirill a promise to become just as strong as that, so he can't afford to fall here. The hyena rushes in for another avalanche of attacks and moves so fast that he can barely react. He just has to hold on and keep healing himself until the enemy gets tired. That's the only way he can survive this. At this point, all he can do is hope for a miracle like the last time where he summoned the Red Viper. Dr. Jin once told him that the Viper was way too strong, and it's a miracle he survived summoning it. Now he has to wait for the same miracle to show up now. And eventually it does as V1 notifies him that his black ether is changing due to him fighting an opponent that is several times stronger than him. Thanks to the never-ending fight and him managing to hold on for dear life, his physical level increases from E rank to D rank. This is the miracle that he has been looking for this whole time, and the slight increase in power is all he needed to take the fight back into his own hands. He activates poison steps once again and immediately notices a difference in his physical capabilities. He is faster, stronger, and his reflexes are sharper than ever. Even the hyena steps back in shock at the sudden increase in power. But even if he has grown stronger, and the hyena is tired, It's still a level C, which means it's still out of his league. But all he has to do is land one single attack. He has one last chance to make things work, and if he does any more than that, he won't be able to control his own poison. Heisen gives up on defense entirely and puts all his energy into one sharp attack. It's a gamble, but all he has to do is land one attack. He bends down and takes on a menacing posture in hopes of controlling his new speed and strength. Then he explodes towards his target, using an improved version of poison steps to close the distance between them as fast as he can. It looks like their unending fight was worth it after all, because the hyena was so tired that it couldn't even react to Heisen's attack at all. The blade cuts through its target perfectly, and the hyena's head goes flying. Now that the battle is finally over, it's time for him to worry about the true boss that will most likely take his life. And that is his older sister when she sees what happened to his clothes. With the boss taken out, all he can do is hope that the next dungeon is at least a little bit easier. But his worries aren't over yet, as something else is watching him from the shadows. He was left to go home shirtless as people pointed at him on the street. It was incredibly humiliating, and he even met the woman that he saved at the Gaebongdong checkpoint. She tries to thank him for his help before, but he's so embarrassed that he pretends that he doesn't know her. And just like he expected, his sister gave him a thorough beating once he got home. The one-sided beatdown was so heavy that he broke his spine from the attack. It was such an embarrassing experience that the next day, he immediately breaks into tears just from the memory of it. But at the moment, he doesn't have time to think about his embarrassment from the last day. He's in another dungeon and currently running away from a giant spider that's trying to kill him. The giant monster slams him into a wall, and he's more concerned about the dirt all over his clothes than anything else. But luckily for him, the monster knocked him right where he needed to be. He has finally found the mysterious bronze sunflower that he has been looking for. The flower changes color based on the difficulty of the dungeon. Bronze is an easy dungeon, silver is normal, and gold is the hardest. He managed to find the lowest quality one, which is the bronze sunflower, and although it's not as valuable as the others, this sunflower can easily get at least 10 million. The highest qualities can go up to 50 million. The reason is because the flower has special characteristics that make it incredibly useful. It has the healing power of an S-rank healer, and even just the bronze sunflower has crazy healing powers. The gold sunflower is said to be able to create miracles. However, those sunflowers only grow in poison dungeons near boss rooms, which makes it incredibly hard for normal people to go searching for them. On top of that, they have the annoying characteristic of withering away when the boss monster dies. That's the reason he's running away from this giant spider instead of taking it out, even though it's much weaker than the hyena he fought before. Because of that, he first has to get the boss under control before heading out to find the flower. Unfortunately, he doesn't have the power to do that. His skills are either to deal massive damage or heal it. V1 informs him that there is another option for him. Exa has a non-lethal mode called White Dream that has been created to bring enemies under control. It can put them to sleep or completely paralyze them. Dr. Jin created it for people like him who are more focused on attack power, but need a special way to subdue enemies. That's a brilliant mode for him to use, but the more pressing matter is why V1 didn't tell him this a long time ago. The reason is because he didn't ask, and it looks like this lens has an annoying sense of humor. Heisen is mad at it, but decides to ignore the obvious disservice in exchange for focusing on taking down this huge spider. He calls out to the spider and that causes it to rush over to him, but Heisen is ready, and he takes the opportunity to cut into the spider right as it rushes past him. White Dream works exactly as it was described, and immediately puts the spider to sleep. With the boss monster out cold, Heisen is able to peacefully take the flower without any more interruptions. Well, except for Pori, who comes out and looks devastated when he's told that he can't eat it. As he holds his prize in his hands, he thinks back to the people that advised him to come get the flower in the first place. The two of them taught him that he had to get the 2 flowers and try to make as much money as he could. As he leaves the dungeon and heads towards where he'll sell the sunflower, he starts reminiscing on his time with the doctor and Kirill. He can't sell it normally since the association has restrictions on things like sunflowers, so he heads to the underground economy center, which is basically a hunter's black market. As soon as he gets within the area, he notices that a lot of suspicious people are glaring at him. He also orders Pori to chomp on anyone that tries anything funny with them. Even the dealers in the black market give him dirty looks as he passes by, and some outright try to force him to buy their goods. The whole place is a huge mess, and it seems like people want to jump him because they think he looks weak. The black market is definitely a place for large groups of suspicious people to gather together, and the atmosphere feels like everyone is going to charge at him at any moment. Now everyone's attention has been diverted to something way more interesting. A tall and huge E-level knight is about to challenge a skinny-looking D-level knight. If they were normal people, the one with the larger body would definitely win. But since they're hunters, things are much different for them. The skinny guy ignores the taller guy's provocations and grabs his opponent by the neck and looks ready to deliver a finishing blow. Although in real fights, victory can depend on hidden skills and crazy advantages, the person with the higher level will always have the upper hand. The fight, and the audience happily cheering them on, have shown Hasten that the black market is a lawless area, and if someone comes in without a weapon, it's normal for people to suspect them of being strange or defenseless. Thankfully, even though he's just a level D, no one has approached him yet, so he can go around pretty normally. As he walks by, he notices an exploration device being sold at one of the tables. It's a lot worse than his V1 lens, and it can't even properly target an opponent's level. Despite that, the price is huge, and although he finds it way too expensive, another person walking by sees it as insanely cheap and buys it immediately. That shows just how spoiled Hasten is by the doctor's amazing technology. That's not his business right now, and his main goal is finding a shop that deals with the sunflower he has in his bag. He asks Pori to take a look around for him with his stealth ability, but when he doesn't get a response, he realizes that Pori is nowhere around him. Then he hears someone screaming and finds Pori chomping on a red-headed girl. He runs to stop him while the little dragon continues to bully the girl, but that proves to be a mistake as the girl slaps his hand away and runs off into the crowd. As she runs away, she activates a stealth ability, disappearing right in front of his eyes. And just like he had expected, he had taken his bag as well. The girl takes a moment to rest in an empty alleyway, thinking that she must have gotten away. She noticed that he put the bronze sunflower in just a black plastic bag and had to take the opportunity to try and steal it. Unknown to her, though, she messed with the wrong person, and Haisen is already right in front of her before she can even react. And unfortunately for her, Haisen heard everything she said, and he's not at all pleased. His intimidating aura is enough to cause her to back away in fear, and he orders her to give back his bag. She rightly realizes that she can't win in a fight against him and agrees to return it. But in return, she suggests that the two of them make a deal. It's painfully obvious that he has no idea where to sell the sunflower he has, and she just so happens to have the knowledge that he needs. She was born and raised in the black market, so she has all the information about the confusing streets and their dealers. She also knows the places that most people wouldn't dare enter, like places that deal with the sunflower. Since it's a restricted object and very rare to come by, not many people even know it exists, but she can recommend a place that deals decently. In exchange, they will split the profits, with her taking a 40% cut and him taking 60%. Haisen is pissed that the girl seems to be underestimating him. She doesn't look like a bad person, and he wouldn't want to fight her, but he has to teach her a lesson for messing with him. He allows his poisonous ether to surround him, creating a menacing aura that causes her to flinch instinctively. Then he tells her that he was planning to scare her, but it looks like he'll have to kill her instead. She tries to fight through the bluff and tells him that he wouldn't be able to find her if she tried to hide, but then he reminds her that she got bitten by his familiar. In reality, the bite doesn't do more than cause a bit of itching, but she doesn't know that. He tells her that Pori's poison can kill an S-rank knight, and the little dragon acts tough to further prove his point. In the black market, the losers are the foolish ones, and to be the winner, you have to make yourself look strong. With his intimidating aura and the threat of imminent death from the poison, he has successfully filled her mind with enough fear to stop her from being able to fight back. With no other choice, the girl breaks into tears and begs for him to spare her life. It looks like his intimidation worked a little but too well. However, her stealth is troublesome to deal with, and if he hadn't done this, she might have escaped again and led him on a wild goose chase. Now that the worst of it is over, he introduces himself to her, and she shakily introduces herself as B. Sue, the daughter of the black market. Now that they are friends, Haisen tells her to be his guide and take him to the place where he can sell his sunflower. B. Sue leads her to a crazy-looking man who introduces himself as Ya-Cha, the strongest person in the whole black market and the man everyone refers to as father. Haisen can barely hide his disgust as he tries to strike a deal with Ya-Cha. It's a bit odd that the ultimate boss appeared just because he wanted to make a simple deal. The reason is because B. Sue, his daughter, brought him here, so she must have felt like there was a reason they should meet. Although he says she's his daughter, he doesn't look that worried by the fact that she brought a strange man with her. Father smiles and reminds Haisen that the rules of the place are pretty straightforward. The one who loses is the foolish one, so if she loses herself, he doesn't care at all. The straightforward ruthlessness of the black market is enough to cause Haisen to lose his poker face. It also doesn't help that the man has been eating raw monster meat the entire time that they've been talking. That just proves that Ya-Cha is as much a monster as the beasts he fights in dungeons. That isn't his problem, though, and he brings the conversation back to his original purpose of coming to the black market. He wants to sell the bronze sunflower, and he's looking to make a good deal off of it. Ya-Cha looks very interested since there has been a lack of supply. On top of that, he also has one of the best quality ones. Father is interested in making a deal, and he seems to be the decisive type, so they should be able to strike some sort of compromise. At least that's what Haisen thinks until Father brings out a poisoned hyena. the same beast that almost killed him in his first dungeon. It looks like Yacha isn't completely convinced about Hysen's sincerity. After all, he managed to find an item that is incredibly hard to come across, even by the Hunters Association. So if he managed to gather it himself, that means that he must have defeated a boss monster inside a poison dungeon. If that's the case, then he should be able to kill the poison hyena as well. His logic tracks, and Hasten wastes no time as he immediately knocks out the hyena before Yacha can even blink. With their deal already done, he tells Yacha to give him an offer. That catches Yacha's interest, and the deal continues. Bisu doesn't appreciate the way Hysen talks to her father and tries to tell him to show some respect, but Yacha orders her to know her place, filling the room with some sort of dangerous aura. Hasten can barely move because of the intense pressure, but then he realizes that it's not just pressure holding him down, it's also bloodlust. Just because his daughter interrupted the conversation, this crazy guy exuded bloodlust so strong that it even gave Hasten a cut on his cheek. That makes it even more confusing just how strong this guy is supposed to be. Bisu is not as lucky as him, and she ended up flying away entirely due to the strong pressure. Yacha doesn't waste time and immediately tries to continue their deal. He starts off the bidding with 60 million, and that changes Hasten's perspective of him entirely. Our protagonist accepts the deal immediately, and even scolds Bisu in his mind for trying to steal from the streets when she has such an amazing father. With the deal done and Hasten's weird advances on Yacha aside, it's time for him to leave the black market. He heals Bisu, who still thinks that the bite from Pori was deadly, and she's amazed by how fast all her wounds were healed. Then Hasten reveals that there was never any danger from Pori's poison, and she wasn't really going to die. That means that Bisu's crying was for nothing, and she tries to take her anger out on Hysen by punching him, but he easily dodges all her attacks. The rules of the black market say that the one who loses is the foolish one, and she just happened to be too naive. Hysen takes the opportunity from her clumsy attack to run away, telling her not to pickpocket next time if she doesn't want to be deceived. After Hasten leaves, Yacha asks her if she really had all her wounds healed. She confirms that she did, but the scar he gave her is still fresh on her face. Then his attention focuses on the black ether on the ground. Yacha picks it up, and to him it feels sticky and disgusting. When he hit Hasten with his bloodlust earlier, their ethers reverberated against each other, and he noticed that the kid had a surprisingly high level of ether. The feel of it reminds him of a time when he was younger and faced off against someone who shattered his will so much that he begged her to end him. The woman refused and kept telling him to get up and fight her, all while holding a smug smile on her face. Hysen's ether reminds him of that woman, and brings up unpleasant memories for the black market boss. Back home, Songhwa prepares Hasten for his trip to the Hunters Association. Thanks to the money from his sale of the bronze sunflower, he was able to pay the entry fee for the Hunter's exam. Now his sister tries to clean him up and make him look better so he can look good for the judges. That would be fine if not for the fact that he's not going for the actual exam yet. He's just going to register, and even though he looks great, there's no need to go this far just for registration. He makes his way to the Hunters Organization building, and on his way, two guys notice him as he passes through. One of them comments that he's pretty weak and wonders why someone like that would be taking a hunter's exam. It's really immature to judge a hunter by their appearance. But the guy can't help but be disgusted by the sight of Hasten. They don't know that Hasten heard all of that, and he swears to remember their faces no matter what. When he becomes a hunter, he will make sure that he never heals them no matter what. But their comments remind him of the spots on his skin. He thought they had gotten better, but it seems like they still look pretty bad. As he turns in his registration form, the woman at the counter finishes his paperwork quickly and tells him to leave as fast as possible. It looks like even she is put off by his appearance. He takes the document and turns to leave, but the fact that she still maintains her disgusted expression even as he walks away makes him upset. She calls for the next person, and the guy is more focused on Hasten than walking up to the counter. He's also put off by Hasten registering and feels like someone as weak-looking as him coming to join only lowers the ranks. The women at the counter recognize him as someone naked Yujiwan. He smiles and tells them not to let anyone know that they caught him here. Apparently he's someone famous, and he doesn't want anyone knowing that he's applying to become a hunter just yet. The girls are excited to see him and promise that they won't reveal the fact that he was there to anyone. Outside the area, with Hasten's application done, it's time for him to go home. As he leaves the building, he notices someone outside protesting on their own. She holds a sign talking about Glory Guild and how they abandoned Gaebongdong. Even though it was a massive disaster, it seems like protests have become a lot less frequent recently. Someone rushes in to tell the woman that she needs to leave before the police are called. Hasten watches them and wonders if he could have done something to save the people of Gaebongdong if he had awakened earlier. The woman becomes more erratic when she's told to leave the area. She clutches the man's shirt and cries loudly about her dead child as the man continues to try and get her to leave. If Hasten had awakened earlier, then that woman wouldn't have to do a protest of this scale. This is the third day that she has come to protest alone, and at this rate she will collapse if she keeps doing this. Hasten can't help but clench his fists in anger as the woman begs to meet the association president only once and her requests are denied. The commotion is interrupted as someone more violent comes in to join the conversation. He's the one that sent the man from earlier to put an end to the woman's protest, but it looks like he has to come out and take matters into his own hands. The guy's name is Nam Hitak, and he's an E-level knight affiliated with the association. The man pushes his subordinate aside and walks over to the lady with a dangerous look on his face. Something about the way he acts makes Hasten very uneasy. He threatens the woman, telling her that he has already given her a warning to stop doing what she's doing, but she keeps ignoring them. Then he raises his fist as the woman shakes in fear and tells his subordinate that if he wants someone to listen, then he has to make his actions short and powerful. With that, he swings his hand at the woman with full force and his fist collides with something, causing dust to rise in the air. He continues with his lesson, telling the woman that she should have listened to him from the beginning, and her constant ignoring his words is what drove him to use drastic measures like this. But it looks like he's going to have to give his lesson again, because someone held back his fist from colliding with the poor woman. Hasten couldn't just sit by and watch as an innocent woman gets attacked by an arrogant guy like this. His anger is clear in his face as he grips the man's hand tighter. Nam Hitak takes his hand back, completely unfazed by the guy who appeared out of nowhere and tells him to get out of the way so he can do his work. Haisen doesn't listen to any of his words and tells him to hold still if he doesn't want his head blown off. He can't stand the fact that a hunter affiliated with the association would use their power against a civilian. He argues that he's just doing official work, and asks who our protagonist thinks he is to be interrupting. Haisen doesn't want to hear any of it and reveals that he's a hunter entrant while spreading his ether. That ticks Nam Hitak off even more and he orders Haisen to remove his ether before things get serious, while also revealing his own ether which has a flaming aura to it. The two look like they're about to fight and the woman tries to de-escalate the situation before it gets any worse. Haisen assures her that she doesn't have to worry because he will always win, and that pisses off Nam Hitak even more. He prepares to go in and fight, but that breaks Hasen's order to not move. Our protagonist is more than happy to show him the consequences of his actions as he takes the arrogant man by the face before he can react and slams him into the ground. Just from a single attack, the man is already left shaking and can barely muster the energy to stand up. But even with that, he swears that he's going to kill Hasen as the anger from being humiliated like this builds up in him. In response, Hasen crouches down beside him and tells the man all his skills to his face. Nam Hitek's brave face is gone as he hears all his abilities listed off like names on a hit list. Then Hasen gets close to the man's face and takes his badge from his collar and warns him that his abilities are not to threaten people but to protect them. The civilians are the ones who need him and not the Glory Guild. As he gives the man a verbal lashing, a group of people come out of the association building to face him, and one of them is the chairman himself, Gu Gun Ai. This man is a level S hunter, and those hunters are known to have reached the ultimate level of strength that a human can achieve. They are also the peak of a hunter's powers and the heroes of the world. When death, failure, or despair are present on the battlefield as hunters fight, these guys push through it all and can change the outcome of any battle to something else entirely. That is because they are not normal hunters, and they don't fall like everyone else. They don't despair or lose, and they use miracles to pull off things that other hunters can only dream of. And right now, two of these hunters stand in front of Hasen, watching him for his next move. The Mountain Gugun Ai and the Miracle Maria, who are two famous people known for being powerful hunters. They came out to find out what the commotion is about and see an entrant committing violence against an association's hunter. To them, it looks like Hasen is going way too far. That doesn't stop the young man's anger, though, and Guguni's words only seem to make him angrier. He tells the older man to stop talking, and that sets off the association chairman immediately. Hasen says that if he came out to stop them, then he should do it properly instead of acting on a whim and trying to intimidate him. Obviously, an entrant is not allowed to attack an association hunter, but in the same way, an association hunter is not allowed to attack a normal person. That causes Maria to gasp in shock while Gugun Ai stays silent and ponders over the implications. It looks like his words struck a chord with them, and he continues by telling them that he will apologize if their association allows knights to hit civilians. Gugun Ai takes a moment to think about the situation and glances back at a horrified-looking Maria for a moment before sighing and deciding to apologize to Hasen. Despite the situation, he admits that Hasen did the right thing and promises that he will make sure to punish the hunter for attacking a citizen. And then he will have the victim properly compensated for the situation. Yuan Wan, the vice leader of the association who also came out with them, promises to do a proper follow-up. The hunter who first came out to warn the woman leads her inside as she bows her head and cries in her hands. Yuan Wan follows them so he can speak to the woman privately, and Hasen sighs in relief, happy that the whole thing didn't turn into a real mess. But he's not done, and tells the chairman the real reason why that woman was protesting. As soon as Gu-gun-I hears the name Gaebong-dong, he freezes for a moment while Maria looks like she's about to faint. He tells them that her child died during the dual gate incident that happened in the area, and it was a really unfortunate incident since it could have been prevented. Then he changes the topic and asks the chairman if he thinks the buildings in the area are clean. After all, they don't even have any dirt or stains while Gaebong-dong sits soaked in blood. From the way he's acting and the anger he's showing, it's clear to the chairman that Hasen is also from Gaebong-dong. Our protagonist congratulates the man on successfully protecting the richer Gupa-dong, and even points out the fact that there were no casualties, but that doesn't change the fact that he didn't come to Gaebong-dong when he was needed. Maria turns her head in shame as he continues to dig into them, and his words especially hit home since he knows that things could have been different. He'd once had Dr. Jin look over the CCTV footage of the disaster, and the man assured him that if Glory Guild had shown up, then the number of victims could have been reduced by half. So knowing this, Hasen asks the man why he chose to abandon the lives of those who could have been saved. Gu-gun-I remain silent as Hasen continues to provoke him. And when he does finally speak, he doesn't answer the question, and instead mocks Hasen for being too young and emotional. Then he releases his ether, glaring at Hasen while reminding him just who exactly he is talking to. The empty threats make our protagonist laugh, and he doesn't back down from insulting the man who left an entire city district to die. He knows exactly who Gu-gun-I is, and he is the #1 knight in Korea who got crushed by Kang Hyeon. That takes things too far, and the chairman looks like he's ready to fight right there with Hasen. For someone to talk brashly to him, that means that they must be confident in their abilities. Hasen still doesn't back down and steps up to the man, confirming that he is in fact confident. He tells Gu-gun-I to have a go at it since he seems so interested, and he's resolved to never lower his head to this man. Elsewhere, Yujiwan sips a drink while leaning against his car. He overhears some people who seem like they are talking about someone, and he immediately assumes that they must be talking about him. They are looking in awe at his direction, and he decided to humor them by giving them a quick autograph to send them away. He calls out to them and asks for a pen and paper. They are confused, and he asks them if they were planning on getting an autograph from him, but that just makes them even more confused. It looks like they have no idea who he is, and that boosts his ego even more since he believes that he managed to charm people who don't even know who he is. In reality, though, they were looking at something else. They point behind him, and he finally notices the huge aura flowing behind him that belongs to the famous S-rank knight Gu-gun-I. It's at that moment that the woman realizes that the person they were talking to is Yu Ji-won. Back with our protagonist, Gu-gun-I has reached his last nerve and gives Hasen one last chance to apologize for his words and actions. Hasen flips him off and tells him that he won't be apologizing for anything anytime soon. That's the last opportunity he can be afforded, and the chairman adjusts his tie with a menacing grip. Then he reaches his hand out to grab Hasen by the face, while the younger man still refuses to back down. That's when Maria has to step in, casting a shield to stop the chairman from going any further. Then she uses her abilities to blast away the president's aura, leaving them standing once again by the association building. Maria then comes up with a quick cover-up story, telling the president that he must have been showing his strength to encourage an entrant to become strong. That is when Gu-gun-I finally notices the crowd gathered around them. Luckily for him, they all believe Maria's words, and it's clear that a misunderstanding could have been formed if she didn't stop them when she did. Gu-gun-I shifts his hand and instead gives Hasen a pat on the shoulder, smiling down at him and pretending like he wasn't about to pop the guy's skull 10 seconds ago. The sudden shamelessness of the man in front of him makes Hasen feel like he is going to throw up. The chairman leans in and whispers that they will be seeing each other often, especially once he becomes a hunter. Maria once again tells him to stop his pointless struggles with the entrant. If he continues to cause trouble, then she will have no choice but to intervene. Once he stops, she takes the opportunity to apologize to Hasen and even bows her head humbly. She promises to give an appropriate apology and compensation to those affected, but Hasen isn't buying it. After all, Gaebang-dong was managed by the Glory Guild and they had a duty to protect it, but they broke that promise too. There's no reason for him to trust her words and appreciate her promise when they have already broken one before. There's no point of giving meaningless apologies and compensation when everyone is already dead. The president clenches his fist in anger, but Maria stops him again before he can do anything rash. After all, nothing that Hasen said is wrong. They were in the wrong for everything that happened, and Maria fully accepts that. Hasen still can't get over the fact that his sister almost died because of these people. There's no way they can solve this anger with just money, and it's not like those who have died will ever come back. With that, he turns to leave, but as he's stepping away, Maria calls him back and asks to know what class he applied for. He stares at her for a moment, then says that he wants to become a healer, so that he can save people who have been abandoned. He may not be able to save them all, but he will never abandon anyone like the Glory Guild did. After Hasten leaves, Gu Gunai reflects on the fact that the kid wants to become a healer. He has a rough ether for a healer, but it'll be good if he turns out to be very high value. As he walks home, Hasten grits his teeth in anger. As far as he's concerned, he lost that matchup. He didn't think that he would win a fight with the #1 hunter in Korea, of course, and he was already certain that she would have stopped the fight if Gu Gunai went overboard with his threats. However, in the moment where they faced each other, Haisen felt small, as if he were facing a huge mountain. That kind of thing is discouraging and shows that he is still far off from becoming strong. When he finally reaches home, he notices that the door is open, and there seem to be voices coming from the inside. He walks in and announces that he's back home, right as someone seems to be trying to sell strange items to his sister. Songhwa turns to welcome Hasten home and asks him when he made friends with the girl that came to visit since she seems very good-natured. Hasten is confused about who this friend could be, but his questions are quickly answered as he sees just who was hanging out with his sister while he was gone. It's Bi-Su, and she winks at him while he stares at her horrified. Without a second thought, he immediately tells her to leave his house. When she doesn't immediately leave, Hasten takes the liberty of throwing her out himself. She's in shock as she lays on the floor wondering what exactly just happened, and Hasten turns to close the door before she can even stop him or try to beg. She reminds him that they became friends in the black market, and there is no reason for him to be so heartless to his only friend. After all, she just came to visit him and they shouldn't be so hostile to each other. Her fake tears aren't fooling him, and he immediately figures out that Ya-Cha must have sent her. He tells her to tell her father that if he dares to approach him again like this, then he won't deal with the man anymore. Hasten knows that he is an important seller to them, but if they want to maintain a relationship, then they need to observe some boundaries. As she's scolding the girl for trying to sneak into his home, Songhwa comes out and lands a clean blow on his chin. He gloves flying into the sky and lands face first on the pavement behind Bi-Su. She's not at all pleased by how harshly he is treating his friend, and scolds him for being so rude while he suffers a mild concussion on the floor. Then she forces him to apologize immediately, and the sudden act of kindness from the older woman makes Bi-Su tear up and run towards her for a hug. The next day, the two drive through town and Bi-Su asks him if he's still sulking over the events that happened yesterday. She has already apologized for approaching his sister, but he hasn't forgiven her just yet. She promises that they aren't going to do anything to her, but Hasten already knows that. He knows that he doesn't have to worry about Bi-Su, but the person he can't trust is Ya-Cha. The man has way too many secrets up his belt, and he could have even placed a dangerous artifact on Bi-Su without her knowing. Even Bi-Su admits that she can't say for certain that nothing will happen to his sister if that were the case, but she does at least know that her father wants to become good partners with him. That's why he sent her personally to come and support him. Hasten doesn't buy it and immediately figures out that she's actually here to monitor him. After all, sunflowers are lessening in the market, and the demands remain the same all while the association has a tight monitor over it. So when someone with sunflowers appears, then it's only natural to want to monitor that person. However, what weirds Hasten out is how obvious they are about it. Bi-Su doesn't even deny the claims and admits that she was ordered to monitor him, but she has never been personally ordered to monitor someone before. She's not blood related to Ya-Cha, and he is only called father because that is the nickname that the black market gave him. Bi-Su sees herself as no different than a homeless man on the street, but for some reason, Ya-Cha treats her specially. The black market's father is not an ordinary person, and the scar she has on her face is evidence of that. She has no idea why he did it, but the day she was sold to the black market he looked at her for a while, then slashed her face. At the time she was in despair because she had lost her family and her will to live, and now she had to live the rest of her life with that kind of person. But despite how she acted, he never did anything bad to her after that initial attack. Haisen tells her to go and get herself checked since she might have gotten beaten up so bad that she lost her memories, but she assures him that is not the case. For instance, the car they are driving wasn't obtained through legal means. The owner of the car was someone who owed Ya-Cha because of a dangerous drug called the poisoned poppy. It looks like a normal plant, but once someone drinks its extract, they lose control of their emotions and see illusions. That means it's practically a hard drug. It can be super addictive, and it's also very easy to purchase, so people easily get addicted to it. But the scary part is that it has no negative side effects. Other than the illusions, the person doesn't feel any issues at all, which makes it even more addictive. The poison poppy ruins people's lives, because although it's easy to buy, the high demand means that it's incredibly expensive. Even when people are running out of money, they still can't stop using it. That's what happened to the owner of the car they are driving in. The man could no longer afford the poison poppy and couldn't pay Ya-Cha on time. After only being late by a day, Ya-Cha ripped his limbs apart and fed him to the dogs. It's the same fate for everyone else that wronged him. Whoever got on his nerves, tried to take his money, or even people who failed to execute his orders. All of them died gruesome deaths at his hands. But for some reason, no matter how much Baisu rebelled, he never did anything to her. She disobeyed him constantly and even tried to steal his money, and the look he would give her would make her feel like she really was about to die. But nothing ever happened. That's why she considers herself special. And that's also why he's sure that nothing will happen to Hyson. When he spoke rudely to Ya-Cha earlier during their deal, anyone else would have had their head sent flying. But instead he just laughed, which shows just how much the crazed man likes him. While they were talking, they eventually reached their destination. It's a poison dungeon which is expected to have a silver sunflower inside. Since there is a silver sunflower, the people inside are expected to be very strong. Bisu wishes him luck as he goes to step inside, but he tells her that she doesn't need to worry. After all, he's the king of places like these. Inside the poison dungeon, Bisu rummages through some items in her bag. She eventually finds what she was looking for under the pile of weird potions and weapons. It's a drug that can lure monsters to wherever it is used. All they have to do is dig a trap and pour the potion into it. Once the monsters gather around, they will be able to hunt them down easily. At least that was supposed to be the plan. But Hasten has his own ideas. He opens up the vial of liquid and pour everything on his head, covering him in the monster-luring liquid. Bisu yells at him, telling him that if he wants to die, he can do it alone, but he shouldn't drag her into it. But Hasten is confident in his abilities. After all, he just has to kill every monster that appears. Then she hands him a pill that's supposed to detoxify the poison in the air, but it can only last for 3 hours at a time. Bisu takes one for herself and tells him that she will get out of the dungeon once the time is up, so he has to do the same. She doesn't know that Hasten doesn't need those kinds of things, but he appreciates that she prepared so many things just to support him. Bisu immediately clears any doubts he might have had about her feelings for him, since she still hasn't forgotten the things he did to her in the black market. Hasten sighs and tells her that she shouldn't prepare a pill for him next time since the dungeons are like home to him. As a poisoner, the dark toxic gas in the air is almost like a perfume to him. And thanks to that, he can focus on taking out the monsters swarming around the dungeon. In a matter of minutes, he's getting chased by an army of goblins. But he has also gotten so used to fighting that things like this don't faze him anymore. He takes the time to think about the black market and how they operate. It's clear that they aren't just a place that sells things. The potion that Bisu gave him is incredibly effective, and it looks like every goblin in the dungeon is after him right now. There have to be at least hundreds chasing after him. They all have a physical level of E and another level of D. Now that he's sure that most of them are chasing him, he stops running and turns to take them all on. Then he activates his poison steps and rushes towards them, taking out a huge number in a matter of seconds. The goblins immediately realize the mistake they've made and try to run away, but it's already too late for all of them. He takes them out one by one, leaving little cuts on their body that kill them immediately. As he fights, he wonders if there are any other skills he can use other than White Dream. He considers asking V1, but after their last conversation about White Dream, his pride won't allow that. But he's sure that as he continues fighting, he will eventually get the answer to that question. After a long while of fighting, he sits on top of a massive pile of dead goblins. By now he should have successfully taken care of all the low-level goblins in the dungeon. He decides to check his status window and notices that his level has gone up by a lot. Poison dungeons make his growth speed up in ridiculous ways. He should be able to keep getting stronger faster than he expected to. Now that he's taken care of all the annoyances in the area, it's time for him to find the silver sunflower. Weirdly enough, there is a desert right next to the goblin forest which looks suspicious enough to have exactly what he needs. Just from being close to it, he can tell that there is something in the area. As soon as he touches the desert sand, he notices something speeding towards him from under the earth. A deadly beast launches itself out from the ground and into the air before looking down at him menacingly. It's pretty obvious that this monstrous venom centipede is the boss monster of the dungeon. It has a physical level of B and another level of A with a difficulty of 4 stars. Just looking at it, Hasten knows that he won't be able to keep his promise to Bisu to leave the dungeon early. Back in the beginning area of the dungeon, Bisu sighs as she realizes that her companion is late. The duration of the pill is almost finished, and she will soon need to head out of the dungeon. She eventually figures out that he must have left her to fight somewhere else. Hasten has been trying to damage the venom centipede for a while now, but its exoskeleton is so hard that he can't stab it. He has been attacking the same spot for so long, but there are no results for his work. At this rate, he should be more worried about surviving the fight than suppressing the monster. But no matter how tough the exoskeleton is, there must be a way to break it. It doesn't even look like it cares about its own body as it slams itself in an effort to take out Hasten. It doesn't look like he'll be able to defeat it with just physical attacks, and fighting on top of its body is a very risky move. On top of that, the environment is concerning, since the uneven ground makes it difficult for him to use poison steps. Since the sand is unstable, it means that the output of his skill is decreased by half. Thankfully, though, he still managed to find a silver lining in all of this. During one of the many times where he was launched into the sky, he managed to notice the location of the silver sunflower. The plant doesn't suit the desert environment, so he was easily able to spot it. The issue there is getting there to take it, and without the advantage of speed, he can't think of any way to pierce the thick exoskeleton. For now, he needs to hold out for as long as he can until he can figure something else out. The monster heads in for another attack, and he tries to use poison steps to get away, but the ground caves in at the last moment, causing him to fall over. The monster's attack lands dead on, and he's slapped away with no chance of recovering himself. His body hurts, and he feels like every bone in his body is shattered. Thankfully, he just barely managed to dodge, unless a full-on attack from that thing would have surely killed him. He forces himself to get up while healing his broken body. But at this rate, if things continue like this, then he won't be able to win. If he had some sort of supporting power, then he would be able to go collect the silver sunflower while the monster is distracted. But he's here alone. Since he can't pierce it, there's no point in even using White Dream to subdue it. In response to his desires, Exa starts to change its form, reassembling into high-tech shoes that boost his speed. As soon as he gets on the ground, he can already feel a significant difference in the environment. It feels like he's standing on flat ground. With this, he should be able to reach a speed fast enough to pierce it. The monster rushes at him again, but he's ready this time and easily dodges out of the way. Then he runs off behind it, dodging all of its attacks and eventually managing to reach the silver sunflower. He picks it up and places it away, then prepares to finish the boss off once and for all. It would be good for him to get the core after killing it, but that would be dangerous since the dungeon is within the association's jurisdiction. For now, he will need to hold himself back since a mistake could make his life as a hunter more difficult. He plans to pierce it with White Dream, but the problem is that he can't pierce its exoskeleton. Since Exa reacted when he talked about his speed and the unstable ground, there's a high chance that his will is connected to Exa. So he tries to get it to change to something with a high penetrating power that will allow him to pierce through the tough shell and finally bring it down. It works, and Exa changes into a weapon with high penetrating power and maximum output. It looks like a drill head, and Hasten grabs it, then aims at the centipede before throwing it with all his might. The drill hits dead on and digs through its skill before eventually pushing through completely and coming out of the other side of the monster. With that, the beast falls, and Hasten is finally able to leave the dungeon. He wonders how many hours he has been fighting this thing for, and his mind wanders to Bi-Su. Back with her, it has been 7 hours since they entered the dungeon, and she clenches her fist and imagines herself killing Hasten for abandoning her for so long. Hasten walks towards the exit with the silver sunflower in hand. He nuzzles against it and wonders just how much money he will be able to get for selling it. With this, he won't have to worry about money for a long while, and he can enjoy everything he wants. He eventually reaches the dungeon entrance and finds Bi-Su waiting for him. She definitely isn't happy with him after having to wait so long, and it looks like she's preparing to beat him up. But as she grabs him by the collar, he notices purple patches starting to appear on her body. Even though she took the pill, staying in a poison dungeon will always have its negative side effects, and from her condition, he can tell that she's already at her limit. Despite all that, she was waiting for him, and even prepared medicine to try and save him if he were to be injured. Haisen smiles and heals her poison injuries, and the feeling of healing energy passing through her is just as comforting as the first time he used it on her back in the black market. Then they pack up and head out of the dungeon while Haisen orders Pori to absorb the rest of the poison in Bi-Su's system. 2 months fly by after that incident, and the two of them have taken on a total of 15 poison dungeons. In that time, they have managed to gather an additional silver sunflower and 5 bronze sunflowers. These will sell off for enough money to fund his dream life for years. Also, Haisen has adjusted to Bi-Su living with them, and the three have formed a deeper bond as they cook, eat, and laugh together. But after so long, it's finally time for Bi-Su to leave. Haisen spends their last night together sitting outside behind her room, thinking about how sad he's going to be since he has gotten pretty close to her at this point. Sometimes, in the dead of night, around the same time every day, she starts to say strange things in her sleep. It's probably a sleeping problem she doesn't know she has, or a trauma that she's trying not to remember. But she calls out to her dad, and considering that she's not saying father, she's probably dreaming about her real father, and not Yacha. It looks like she had it tough as well despite being so carefree. The next day, it's time for her to go and she packs up her stuff to take back to the black market. Just before she leaves, Songhwa pulls Bi-Su in for a hug and tells her that the two have become close enough to be considered sisters over the past few months, so she can come and visit anytime she wants. Haesen doubts that it'll be anytime soon, but Bi-Su hugs her and cries, promising to definitely come and visit again. Even Haesen can't help but hope that she will come back to visit soon. After that touching goodbye is over, the two head back to the black market with their loot. It's been a while since Hasten has been there, and things are noticeably quieter than the last time he was there. Before it was like there were fights happening in every corner, and just like clockwork, a fight breaks out right in front of them. A customer tries to harass a shopkeeper into refunding his money, even though their deal has already ended. The two start to argue, and it seems like they are going to get into a fight soon. Haisen asks Bu-Su if she's going to stop them since it seems to be getting serious, but she tells her companion not to worry about it. In the black market, the loser is at fault, but in this situation, there's a reason why the seller is letting himself lose. That's because there is always someone who comes in to take care of commotions like these. He's pretty much the police of the black market, and just like a summoned familiar, he appears eventually to stop the tussle. He tells the thuggish customer that he can't just stand by and watch him disrupt the market's affairs. The customer stops beating up the shopkeeper and approaches the new mystery fighter who remains calm and composed. Despite the confrontation, he keeps his cool and even bows his head as if he wants to avoid any conflict. But there is something in his voice. Haisen recognizes it as a pressure similar to what he felt from Gugun Eye. That means that the newcomer could potentially be as strong as the Glory Guild chairman, and it makes sense that someone like that would show up to subdue a troublesome B-ranked knight. The troublemaker is stronger than he looks, and he's definitely not just some random nobody off the street. The punk approaches the black market policeman and informs him that the reason he was pummeling the shopkeeper is because the guy rigged his prices. That makes him the victim in all of this. While that is sad, the rules of the black market are pretty clear. Once a deal is completed, then it is done forever. That means he still doesn't have the right to beat up a shopkeeper trying to earn a living for himself. The troublemaker sighs and realizes that there is no point in using his words. For now, it's best for him to use his fists. The man looks reluctant to fight, but with a punch flying right at his face, he has no choice but to strike back. He moves with tremendous speed, deflecting the punch and putting the troublemaker in a vulnerable position before he can even blink. The fight drags on from there, and before long, the troublemaking customer is left beaten and bruised while the one-man cleanup crew doesn't even have a stain on his clothes. But the thug isn't done just yet since he has something powerful under his sleeve. One of his abilities allows him to become stronger as he fights for longer. It's an ability that allows someone to become stronger when they see blood. It's not nice to see your own blood, but that doesn't change the fact that this is a very dangerous ability. Just from the surging ether, Hasten can tell that this guy has already grown into someone menacing. Thanks to his ability, he's already no longer a B-level knight anymore. The thug gets cocky and tells the man to beg on his feet like a dog, but even with that, he still throws several punches ready to take revenge for all the pain that he received just a moment ago. But after the smoke clears, he realizes that he has just been punching air this entire time. The man appears beside him like nothing happened, and in a blind rage, he throws another punch. But this time, instead of simply dodging, the attack was completely redirected right back to the sender. What he did goes beyond just having skills, and Hasten can't wrap his head around how he did it even after watching it happen. No matter how many times the thug tried to attack, each one was sent right back to him like some sort of reversal. At one point, he couldn't even touch the man and just kept on punching the air. After playing with the thug for a while, it's finally time for him to end the fight. Through some weird skill, the man seems to multiply himself and appear in 3 places at once. Then each one unleashes a devastating strike on the thug, causing him to kneel and fall over immediately. Despite how effortless the fight seemed, Bisu tells him that it's rare for him to use that much strength, which means that the troublemaker must have been pretty strong. With the thug taken out, Bisu pulls out her phone and calls the other members of the cleanup crew to come and get rid of the troublemaker. Hasten is still focused on just how monstrous that guy's strength was, and according to Bisu, that was only a fraction of it. Even after such an intense battle, he's barely even out of breath at all. His physical abilities are like a knight, but he also has the illusion magic of an esper. With no other way of verifying, Hasten has to call on V1 to scan the man's abilities. Surprisingly, V1 comes back with nothing. Apparently the man's records have been erased, which heavily implies that the man isn't just an ordinary hunter. After a little bit more digging, V1 finally comes back with some good results. The man's name is Ojiho and he's a 49-year-old hunter. Unfortunately, a large amount of data about him has been erased, which still makes it difficult to dig up info about him. But V1 manages to confirm that his physical level at the time of data erasure was that of an E-level knight. That shouldn't be possible considering he just took care of an A-rank fighter very easily. But V1 is never wrong about things like these. He barely has time to contemplate further as the man pops up right in front of him and scares the living daylights out of Hasten. His embarrassing girl screams aside. Hasten and the man introduce themselves, and his friendly side is so different from the calm aggression he had before that can't get used to it. It's hard to believe that someone like this is part of the black market. The 3 of them head over to meet Yacha and trade off the sunflowers that he gained from the poison dungeons. The whole thing comes out to 7.5 billion won, and the black market father congratulates him on graduating from poverty and bringing in big money. The conversation shifts, and Yacha asks about the fact that he registered as a healer for the hunter exams. Hasten reveals that being a healer is just a portion of his full power, and the reason he wants to become one full-time is because of his own personal goals, and also because he can't use his original power as a hunter. Of course, he can't talk about Kirill or his training with Dr. Jin, so the rest is classified information. But the little he has said so far seems to be enough for Yacha. The larger man decides to end their dealings for the day, but Hasten isn't done just yet. Yacha warns him not to get any funny ideas, but decides to play along for now. Our protagonist decides to ask for an information fee for the things that he just revealed. The unorthodox request makes father smile, and he asks what would happen if he refuses to pay that fee, but Hasten already knows that isn't happening. When it comes to making deals, Yacha is the most trustworthy person in the black market. There's no way he would refuse when he's asked for something like this. On top of that, Hasten is a pretty important dealer, and Yacha definitely wouldn't want to strain their relationship over an extra fee. Yacha is impressed and gives him 95 points for his confidence and knowing how to get his way in negotiations. The remaining 5 points were deducted because he's way too rude. With that, Yacha decides to accept the deal and offers up more money, but Haisen has a different idea. He wants to train under the Ojiho and learn his techniques. Yacha thinks for a moment, but the cost for information and learning combat techniques don't add up. Even if he gives up all the money he just earned, it still wouldn't be enough to pay for it. Haisen considers that as a possibility and offers to owe Yacha the rest of the money as long as he gets to train. This is very risky knowing who exactly he's deciding to owe. Yacha rips people apart regularly for failing to pay what they owe in time. Bisu tries to warn him before he makes a mistake that could end his life, but Haisen has already made up his mind. A poisoner's lethality is their greatest asset, but he's lacking a lot of other things when it comes to combat. Right now, this is a risk he has to take. Yacha asks the kid why he's going so far, and even making an obviously stupid decision just to learn to fight better. Haisen tells him that the more weapons a hunter has, the better and stronger they are. He only saw Ojiho fight once, but that brief time is enough to convince him that those techniques will be very useful. He needs to invest in this right now so he can grow stronger. This entire time he has only managed to defeat his enemies due to how overpowered poison steps are. When left alone to fight, he's no better than a newbie hunter. When a hunter awakens, it's very unlikely that their rank changes at all throughout their life, which means that Ojiho is most likely still an E-rank hunter, yet he has a martial art ability so strong that it ignores ranks. Haisen drops the suitcase of money back on the table and promises to make up the rest of the money somehow. But right now he's desperate to make this deal and start training as soon as possible. Yacha can smell that desperation and decides to agree to the deal. He also surprisingly gives Haisen back the money since he doesn't gain anything by taking this from him. Later on, he will reveal the real price of their deal after he's done training. With that done, the three walk out of the room, but before he leaves, Yacha asks Haisen if he has any intention of learning from the father of the black market. The answer is an instant no, with Haisen having the common sense to know that training with a man like that could kill him. Yacha leaves with a laugh and Haisen turns to leave as well, knowing that the hunter exams are the next big obstacle he has to cross. Bisu calls out to him as he leaves and wishes him good luck on the exam, causing Haisen to smile. He's more than sure that he'll take first place in the exams. The hunter exams happen because alongside dungeons, there are also metahumans who chose to use their awakened powers to commit various crimes. So the Hunters Association holds a yearly exam to recruit new talented people to join the ranks and fight for justice. The famous exam is known for having high stanza, and being a hunter is a job that gives more popularity than even celebrities. The whole country also focuses on the exam as well, with people constantly wondering if this year will be one where another S-rank hunter emerges. In the midst of all this worry and interest, this year's hunter exam finally starts. Two people walk through the crowd of potential hunters, one looking particularly excited, while another looks bored with their job. The bored man asks his younger subordinate if an S-rank will show up during this year's hunter exam. While the excited man is happy to give good news, the truth is that getting an S-rank is statistically difficult. So instead of an S-rank, he's more hopeful that a hunter who will be cheered on by the people will appear. This year, he wants to see a star hunter who will give their all to protect civilians. Although recently there have only been gangsters, and not a lot of people have decided to use their powers for good. While they discuss, a familiar face walks through the crowd as well. It's Yu Jinwan, and as usual, he catches the attention of everyone around him with a dazzling smile. He's a B rank that the whole nation is looking forward to, and from his attitude and gentle disposition, he's very much aware of this. A reporter runs up to him to get the latest scoop on what his plans are. He applied to become a healer because he wants to protect people unlike knights or espers who defeat monsters. He announces to the world that all he wants to do is save people. His aura is so bright that it blinds some people around him, and others can only watch in awe. The association member from before, on the other hand, is completely unimpressed. From his answer, he can see that Yu Jinwan has no sense of duty or responsibility for his power. It's obvious that being a hunter for him is just a stepping stone for his other goals. The president of the Hunter Association is sick, and other leaders are either corrupt or have dirty rumors spreading about them. Gu Gunai as well is also under a lot of controversy after what happened with Gaebongdong. He has a good image, but right now people don't trust him as a hunter. The only person he can think of that he's sure everyone can trust is someone from long ago. He considers that person to be the strongest and best hunter in the world, but they long since went missing and forgotten because of a certain unspoken incident. But they have long since been thrown into the shadows, and just talking about them in public is enough to get a person sent to prison. For now, they need someone else like that to emerge and take over the world with their presence. They need someone with potential to be a star, and someone who does things for others without thinking of themselves. It just so happens that the person he's thinking about is also walking through the crowd, and just like Yu Jinwan, everyone's eyes are on him as he makes his way to the registration desk. Even the woman who once looked at him in disgust stares up at him in awe as he drops his registration form and applies to be a healer. That person is Cheon Hyson. Elsewhere, Yu Jinwan is having his own personal photo shoot with a cameraman who seems way too eager about his job. They pause for a moment to admire all the great pictures that came out, and Yu Jinwan is proud of the fact that he's pretty skilled in the modeling industry. While on the outside, he has a humble expression and commends the photographer. On the inside, he knows that the real reason the photos came out so good is because he's an amazing model. The photographer asks if he can use the pictures for an article and thinks up a title idea. He comes up with a title of The Next Generation Savior Who Will Succeed Maria. Yu Jinwan is happy with the extravagant title, but asks the photographer to hold on with submitting the article until he has achieved the highest place in the meta-human ranks. While the glazing fest continues, Hasten walks by, heading towards the hall for hunter exams, and the photographer instantly notices him as someone of interest. Unfortunately, Yu Jinwan notices him too, but for the wrong reason. He accidentally bumps into him, causing the B-rank healer to fall to the ground and hit his head. He opens his eyes slowly and finds himself being held up in a way that causes the entire crowd to stop and stare. The incident almost causes the entire genre of the manhwa to change. They get up from the ground and Yu Jinwan adjusts his clothes while looking very pissed off by the incident. Hasten considers that it might be because of the cleaning fee for taking care of his clothes, and offers to exchange numbers so he can take care of the clothes later. Yu Jinwan instead slaps the phone out of his hands and claims it was an accident. He returns the phone to our protagonist, but the screen is damaged, and he offers to pay money for the repair fee later. Then he leans in close to our MC and tells him to stop bringing so much attention to himself. The spotlight is supposed to belong to Yu Jinwan, and it will be troublesome if anyone else is more eye-catching than him. With his intimidation done, he pats Hasten on the shoulder and turns to leave. But our MC isn't the type of person to take disrespect like that laying down. He calls the loudmouth back over, and he looks particularly angry that the guy decided to make fun of his clothes, especially since these clothes were made by his older sister. Then he grabs Yu Jinwan by the collar and demands for an apology with a scary look in his eye. The crowd that was watching in awe just a moment ago now stares in disbelief as Hasten looks ready to beat the daylights out of Yu Jinwan. Despite all the eyes on them, Yu Jinwan looks unfazed and prepares to say something back, but an announcement goes over the speaker, telling everyone that the meta-human score measuring event is about to begin. With the exams finally starting, people start to file into the hall to take the test, but whispers about the person that picked a fight with Yu Jinwan still spread around the crowd. The loudmouth takes the opportunity to make a bet with Hasten, while also forcing our MC's hand away from his collar. From the strength that Yu Jinwan showed in pulling his hand away, he can tell that he is a healer who has the strength of a knight. Something definitely seems off, but he doesn't have the time to think about it as Yu Jinwan states the rules of their bet. Whoever has the higher score in the meta-human score measuring event will be the winner. The loser will then have to give the winner 10 million won. On top of that, if Hasten wins, then his opponent will throw in an apology as well as the money. Yu Jinwan thinks that is enough to scare our MC, but instead, Hasten has recorded the whole conversation as proof and warns him that he better pay up to the agreed deal later on after the bet is over. This guy doesn't realize that he just messed with the wrong person. As the event continues, Maria watches over the crowd and specifically Yu Jinwan. The boy seems to have much more ether than the first time they met, and he has grown from an E-rank hunter to someone much stronger, which she is trying to figure out for herself. Yu Jinwan isn't an official hunter yet, so he shouldn't have been able to enter dungeons, so it makes no sense that he has grown so much stronger. Even she can tell that something is off. She decides to ask the president, who watches silently over the crowd beside her. He answers very vaguely, and she can tell that there is more to this than he's letting on. She's already aware that a few months ago, there were rumors that Yu Jinwan was visiting the research lab a lot. While most people thought they were only showing him the research products and giving him a tour, it's also possible that there might have been some sort of experiment going on. After visiting the research lab, Jinwan gained a surprising amount of ether, and she's certain that something more went on behind the scenes. Time goes by, and people take their exams with scores varying from the hundreds to the thousands. It looks like anyone below 1,000 points fails the exam. Eventually, Hasten and Yu Jinwan are called to take their exams together. The two stand in front of the measuring instrument and get ready to take their exams. Everyone is focused on the top prospect of this year's exams, Yu Jinwan. Whispers fill the crowd as people wonder what score he will get. Since he's the son of the vice chairman of Glory Guild, people expect him to at least have some talent. Most of the newcomers for this year were bad, so even a D rank would be welcomed by most guilds. Yu Jinwan confidently steps up to the measuring device and places his hand on it, ready to show everyone the overwhelming difference of his power. The orb glows with a gentle golden light, and everyone is in awe as his ether spreads through the entire room. His abilities are on a whole other level compared to all the other applicants from this year. At the end of the test, his metahuman score is over 9,000. With a score like that, everyone is sure that he's going to get first place this year, and things aren't looking so good for Hasten. He's going to have to beat a record-level score like that to win the bet. Yu Jinwan smugly watches as Hasten walks up to get his own score calculated. Normally, a score like that would be an insurmountable gap for anyone to cross, but he doesn't look worried at all. He confidently walks up and places his hand on his orb, and it immediately shines with a light several times brighter than what Yu Jinwan demonstrated. His ether surrounds the entire room in a powerful light, and the entire room gasps in shock. Even Gu Gun Eye can barely believe what he's seeing. Once the light dies down, the room is filled with silence at the results. Hasten's score cannot be measured. Yu Jinwan starts to laugh and incorrectly judges that Hasten's score can't be measured because it is too low. He starts to figure out that the lights were probably caused by some sort of special effects. As he's making his baseless results, the staff from earlier bumps past him with his subordinate following close behind. The staff is the head referee, and his name is Pyo Hyokyu, and his subordinate is Choi Gangjun. He orders everyone to stand back while they address the problem with Hasten's results. In Gangjun's hands is a golden orb that looks way more powerful than the one they originally used to test their scores. They ask him to use the orb and measure his scores one more time. It is much more sensitive than the last device, so even just a little bit of his ether flow will be enough to get an accurate reading. This device is a gold core, and it's a high-quality core that is only used on boss monsters with a danger level of above 7 stars. The fact that the device was made to measure monsters' ether means that the person they are bringing this out for must be a monster in his own right. There has only been one hunter who has ever been measured with a gold core, but the results were not known, but now Hasten has become the second hunter to achieve this feat. His result comes out to a massive score of 100,000 points. In a matter of seconds, the crowd erupts in cheers and surrounds him. Reporters outside the venue start calling in with the news that a new S-rank hunter has appeared. As hordes of people surround Hasten, he starts to get overwhelmed by the number of people that suddenly want to talk to him. He's forced to use poison steps to escape from his new rabid fans before they drag him down like zombies. Thankfully, he is fast enough that they can't see where he disappeared to. He uses the opportunity to escape, but first he has to collect his winnings from the no longer smug Yu Jinwan. Despite gripping his fists so hard that blood starts to pool in his hands, he reluctantly starts to apologize. It looks like saying those words took a few years off his life, and Hasten crosses his arms in anger for a moment before tossing a piece of paper with his account number on it. Then he walks off as Yu Jinwan literally cries blood in anger and swears to kill this man that has managed to embarrass him like this. Elsewhere, two brothers watch the events unfolding in the room. The two of them are Ga Hanshin and Ga Yulchin, the guild masters of Bishop Guild, and Hasten's score is very interesting to them. The gold core's maximum score is 100,000 points, so for Hasten to get that, it means that they don't truly know what the limits of his power are. The two decide that they must recruit him to join their guild no matter the costs, especially since all the good prospects were snatched from them last year. Beside them, someone else is also watching the scenes with a mix of anger and excitement. It's Gu Gun Eye, and what he has just seen has proven to him that his initial assessment of Hasten was very wrong. With the first test completed, the second test is a practical exam. Hasten stands in front of a giant monster tiger and his task is to heal it. The first test measures a hunter's potential, so this second test is a true demonstration of a hunter's healing ability. All the targets are injured monsters, and to pass, all they have to do is heal the monster. But it's obvious from looking around that things have definitely been stacked against him. Everyone else has been given small monsters to heal while his target is a giant tiger. This monster looks much stronger than the centipede that he fought in the poison dungeon, and he wonders how they caught something so powerful. He can't even tell its identity with V1's analysis. meaning that this beast is something completely different from normal monsters. It's obvious that the vice chairman's son must have had something to do with this. Hasten takes a moment to try and figure out how exactly he's going to heal this beast, when suddenly he hears a voice speaking to him. It's the tiger, and it asks if Hasten is the man who will kill it. It seems like our MC is the only person who can hear it, and it doesn't sound very happy at all. Humans once destroyed its core and put it in such a sorry state, but Hasten assures the giant tiger that he is not here to kill it, but to save it. The monster doesn't believe that, and even if he is telling the truth, the tiger's core is already destroyed, meaning that healing it is not going to be a simple task at all. Hasten decides to show his healing abilities instead of just making empty promises. He has to heal the tiger since if it dies, then things will be difficult for him as well. With that, he activates his healing ability, and the tiger is stunned to silence as its wounds begin to heal. It's interesting watching him work on a target since most entrants don't have any experience in healing. It's hard to believe that he's a beginner hunter, and the guild masters of Bishop Guild are only getting more curious about him. The tiger also realizes that this isn't Hasten's first time healing. Our MC has the abilities of someone who has practiced healing for hours on end. Hasten also knows that healing a monster with a broken core will also damage him, and although he's already shivering with exhaustion, he's still determined to heal the tiger. The tiger urges him to end his healing before he gets seriously injured from the backlash, but Hasten only gets more determined after hearing that. He assures the tiger that he is way tougher than he looks, and the tiger starts to wonder if he will really be able to heal all the wounds on its body. But Hasten plans to go a step further than that. The tiger is surprised that Hasten is almost treating it like a human, since most times he's used to being cruel. But in the same way, monsters kill humans to fill up their bellies, so it's normal to hate them. But that's no different than what humans do to each other. And at the same time, there are probably monsters out there that can save humans, so there's no reason for Hasten to refuse saving a life just because it's a monster. With that, the healing is done, and as a bonus service, Hasten weakened the chains binding the monster to the facility. When the time is right, the tiger can take the chance to break the chains and escape. The monster calls Hasten a clueless fool, but thanks him regardless. He tells Hasten that this is the second time he has felt compassion from a human, with the first being a mysterious woman. Then it reveals its true form. The tiger is not a monster, it's actually a spirit, and it's known as the guardian spirit of the great spirit world, the Imperial Tiger. After introducing itself, it asks for Hasten's name, and our MC introduces himself as the man who will become the strongest hunter in the world. With that, the Imperial Tiger promises that half of its life will belong to Hasten. Our MC appreciates getting a new companion, and nicknames it Huge Tiger since it is a very large tiger. Imperial Spirit Tiger is way too long of a name for him to remember. Huge Tiger sighs in annoyance but doesn't argue since they don't have the time. The test has ended and it's time for them to wrap things up. Referee Pio announced that Haisen has passed the test and he walks away victorious. Meanwhile, someone else is having a really hard time finishing up his practical test. Yu Jinwan has been working to try and heal the little monster in front of him, but unfortunately his time is up. One of the staff comes to tell him that he has to leave the hall, but the vice chairman's son begs for just another minute to practice his healing. The exam is already over though, and it looks like he's the only one who didn't manage to heal his target. Referee Pio calls over the announcement system and tells Yu Jinwan to stop using his abilities immediately. The test needs to be fair for everyone, and if they gave him extra time, then it would be unfair to the other entrants. Yu Jinwan angrily asks Pio what department he is from and threatens to report him to the vice chairman for this disrespect. Pio is having none of it and tells Gang Jun to escort him out. The younger referee does so happily and drags the young man out while he's kicking and screaming. This is not just for the sake of the exam, but also for the sake of Yu Jinwan since he looks like he is in danger of ether exhaustion. As soon as he hears that, Yu Jinwan realizes for the first time that his nose is bleeding. Despite that, the young man still begs to be given another chance. But it's already too late. He barely passed this time, but only based on luck and nothing more. As the whole confrontation goes down, Haisen passes by them on his way out. The two men notice each other, and Haisen mocks him silently before laughing and walking off, leaving Yu Jinwan even more embarrassed than before. Later on, Pio is called to the vice chairman's office and the man is not happy about the way his son was treated. He heard that his son was ranked as a level E, and Pio confirms that although he got a good score on the first test, he didn't show good results in the practical test. But the vice chairman is hearing none of that. He throws things from his desk angrily and accuses the referee of obstructing Jinwan's test. The vice chairman continues to yell at his subordinate, but the man is barely listening. Instead, his mind wanders to the sick chairman that has not been seen in a while. Then the vice chairman asks about the gold core that was used during the exam. Apparently after Hasen used it, it ended up broken, and the man was upset because of how expensive it was. The core deteriorated completely because some sort of toxic ether was introduced into it directly after Hasen took the exam. Now it's completely unusable, and the vice chairman orders for it to be thrown away. Back in the main hall, Hasten is personally given his hunter badge by Maria as a crowd of reporters gather around them and take pictures. With the hunter exam finally over, he has officially been classified as an S-rank healer. Yu Jinwan, on the other hand, just barely passed with an E rank. He had way too much ether for his skill level, and now because of his showboating, everyone knows about it. With his work at the association done, Hasten plans to head home. But as soon as he walks through the building's doors, he's surrounded by an army of news reporters eager to get the first scoop on Korea's new big S-rank hunter. It's impressive that these many people have come to interview him despite the fact that he just passed the exam. It looks like rumors really do travel fast. Some of the reporters get way too close to his face and he can barely hold back his irritation as they shove their mics directly onto him. Then the reporters start to fight amongst themselves, completely squishing Hasten's face and causing him to finally take matters into his own hands. He grabs the first mic he sees and yells into it, commanding everyone to shut up and listen. The crowd goes quiet for a moment and everyone turns to look at Hasten. With all their attention on him, he tells them that he won't be doing interviews for the time being before using poison steps to take off into the sky faster than anyone can see. He lands on the rooftop of the association and prepares to run home. But once again, he's stopped from doing so by the 2 Bishop Guild masters who have been watching him this whole time. They introduce themselves and get straight to the point, asking him to join the Bishop Guild. In exchange, they promise that they will listen to every demand he has. Haisen declines their offer and tells them that he has no plans of joining a guild at the moment, but someone else joins the conversation, and it's clear he won't take no for an answer. Chairman Gu Gunai appears, and his menacing aura changed the entire atmosphere of the conversation. Then he asks Hasten to come to Glory Guild. Later on, a car speeds through the highway. Inside, the driver talks about the fact that Yu Jinwan barely passed as an E rank. Apparently, he was born defective, so no amount of experimentation done on him would fix that problem. Somehow, he still managed to join Glory Guild with so little talent, but his results could have been better if he wasn't so careless. As he rambles on, he notices that the man he's carrying has some sort of happy smile on his face. It's Gu Gunai, and he's especially pleased today because something interesting happened. Earlier, back on the rooftops, Hasten did not seem happy at all that Gu Gunai had the audacity to ask him to join Glory Guild. Gu Gunai especially is not in a position to make offers to him at all. Gayol-chan, not understanding the history between the two, thinks that Hasten is referring to the fact that Bishop Guild came there to ask him to join first. He tries to push Gu Gunai away, but the man swats the intruding hand away like it were a disgusting pest bothering him. Gahanchan isn't happy about someone touching his brother in such a disrespectful way, and he activates his ice-based abilities to threaten Gu Gunai. The Glory Guild chairman is not fazed at all and uses his ether to break all the ice attacks. It looks like a fight is gearing up between the 3 men, and things are about to get very heated as it seems. Gahanchan mocks Gu Gunai for his random burst of confidence because no matter how much they beat him up, he will always have Maria to heal him up. That pushes Gu Gunai to attack first, and he rushes in for a punch, but it's easily blocked by Gayol-chan, who also looks incredibly angry that the man would try and hurt his brother. The 2 brothers are actually S ranks just like Gu Gunai, and a fight between the 3 of them could completely destroy the city. Gayol-chan tells his brother to stop the massive attack he was preparing to unleash since they are in a residential area. Their recruitment is already a failure at this point since they've shown Hasten a shameful sight by fighting amongst each other. They ask him to consider their offer so they can recruit him another time, but he denies it immediately. The Bishop Guild is way too far from where he lives, but if they allow him to work from home, then he will consider their offer. But even though he's refusing to work for them, he would rather die than join the Glory Guild. Gugun. I smiles and tells him that his stubbornness will only last for now, but in the end, the place he belongs is the Glory Guild. With that, all men departed and no deals were reached with the new S-rank Hasten. Now that he has been officially registered as a hunter, it's time for him to face the next part of being a legal hunter. This part is the start of every hunter's career as they struggle with the very familiar concept of death. A lot of dungeon hunters have been killed in beginner dungeons because they overestimate themselves and head into beginner dungeons alone, which leads to them dying meaningless deaths. Because of that, the Hunters Association made a special rule, which states that all hunters need to clear 5 3-star or lower dungeons in groups of 5 before they can go into dungeons fit for their levels alone. This system is called the Hunter Probation System, and because of it, although Hasten is more than strong enough to enter normal dungeons alone, he also has to start from the beginning and work his way up to avoid trouble. He reaches his pre-assigned meeting spot and joins up with his new teammates. 2 of them are especially excited to see him, and they run up to introduce themselves. They are Do Yu-sung and Do Yu-chan, sibling espers who are working together as new hunters. Hasten introduces himself, then asks about the other 2 who were supposed to be with them. The other two teammates don't look as friendly as the siblings, and they laugh when they see Hasen before introducing themselves. One is named Park Hyosang and the other is Kim Chuho. They clearly look and act like thugs, and Hasen is put off by how blatantly stereotypical they are. Then they ask him if he wants to have a meeting before they enter the dungeon. Hasen has to lie that this is his first dungeon, because he can't casually reveal that he has been entering dungeons illegally, much less poison dungeons. In reality, he has been to over 10 dungeons. The two thugs then offer to support him since they are supposed to be veteran hunters who know how to handle dungeons. They underestimate Hasen's fighting abilities since he is only a healer despite being a level S. They offer to help him defeat the monsters in the dungeon in exchange for a small fee. Hasen glares at them and asks what would happen if he says no, and although Park Hyosang initially glares back, he hides it immediately and tells the S rank that nothing will happen if he says no. After all, they're just trying to help out beginner hunters, so there's nothing they can do if their help is denied. They inform him that two sibling espers have already paid them money anyways, which they hope will convince Hasen to pay up. But it's obvious that they have more devious intentions. They are both knights with a physical level of D, so dungeons like these would be really easy. So why are they accepting small amounts of money and going into low-level dungeons instead of joining any guild and making names for themselves? It's obvious that they got kicked out of their guild and became vagabonds as a result. So now they make money by taking from beginner hunters who would be scared to enter their first dungeons. With their meeting done, it's time for them to head into the dungeon, and Hasen is prepared to kill them if they cross the line. Inside the dungeon, the group fights level E monsters with a difficulty of 1. The two D-rank hunters seem to be having the time of their lives, but they're getting way too worked up while fighting 1-star enemies. It's obvious that they are pretending to fight hard, while letting small groups slip over in Hasen's direction every once in a while. This is most likely because he didn't pay them for their services, so they are taking it out on him. If it were anyone else in this situation, then someone could easily get hurt because of them. Meanwhile, the two espers are enjoying the show that the D-level hunters are putting on. Hasen asks why they are not fighting despite being in a dungeon as hunters. They spend a lot of money, but they should still use the opportunity to hunt some small fries and gain experience. The two clearly don't have confidence in their abilities, but not doing anything at all is much worse for their growth than anything else. Hasen reminds them that the hunters are just very big rats, and even if they get hurt, they are partnered up with an experienced healer. With a little bit of motivation, the two decide to join in with the fight, irritating the D-level hunters who were already prepared to take on the whole dungeon by themselves. The two try to intimidate the Esper siblings by telling them that a rodent the size of a house will soon appear. And as if on cue, a loud roar shakes through the entire area as something large makes its way towards them. With the boss on its way to them, the hunters demand for an extra 1 million won if they want to continue receiving protection. They try to argue that this wasn't in their agreement, but the two finally show their true colors. They blame their sudden nonchalance on Hasen, who refused to pay them earlier. They expect him, who is just a healer, to buckle under the pressure and finally give them money. Being a high-ranking S-level demands a lot of responsibility. And now that he's a level S, he can't avoid getting people's attention. The two espers try to defend Hasen since he has done nothing wrong, but the level D hunters aren't afraid of any backlash. After all, Hasen has no guild to support him, meaning that they can do whatever they want. With that in mind, the two decide to stay still and not help them fight the boss unless Hasen gives them the money that they ask for. If not, then they will inflict wounds on themselves and spread rumors that the S-level healer tried to kill them. Hasen has been silent this entire time, listening to their empty threats without a word, and they mistake that for fear. Park Hyosang even considers recording him struggling with a 1-star dungeon and posting it online to further make fun of him. He might even be able to make money from selling that kind of video online. A prideful level S hunter wouldn't want their weaknesses exposed like that after all. Hasen finally moves and walks towards the hunters that have been running their mouths for far too long. He tells them that when he was young, he thought hunters were amazing and cool. Now that he's interacting with them himself, he can see that they are totally worthless people. The two hunters have gone way too far with their scheme, and Hasen is beyond angry at their stupidity. Suddenly, the two level D hunters are left paralyzed by Hasen's ether surrounding them. Park Hyosang still tries to take control of the situation and tells Hasen that he will report anything he does to the media, but Hasen is still not impressed by their petty threats. He asks them if they know of a hunter who was given a personal lesson by Gu Gun-ai. He reveals that the person who received that lesson was him. Although he hates using the name of that man, in this situation, he'll pull any card he can to make sure that these two learn their lesson. Park Hyosang definitely remembers hearing something like that recently from a news article. If that really is the truth, then there's no way anyone in the media is going to help him out of this situation. He still tries to force the situation, and starts to wonder if he should kill Hasen for his actions, but he notices immediately that something is wrong. Hasen stands behind them, holding Exa in its white dream state as the two men realize that they can't move. Now the tables have completely turned, and it's obvious that Hyson is completely in charge of the current situation. The two men have finally realized the kind of situation that they're in, and they can finally stop acting like third-rate villains. Hyson's piercing gaze is enough to convince them that they are completely powerless in this situation, and he even tells them that he's not afraid of the world's eyes being on him. Their confidence from before is completely gone, and Hyson wonders if White Dream even managed to paralyze their tongues. Now that the tables have completely turned, Hyson makes the men an offer. Since the two of them are out of commission for the moment, and there is a boss monster on its way, they are currently in a very dire situation. If things continue like this, Hyson can't guarantee they will survive. But if they want his help so he can carry them, they will need to pay him a small fee. After saying that, he demonstrates just how powerful he is by sending the boss monster flying with a single kick. Kim Hyo-san notices that Hyson didn't kick the boss monster hard enough, which means that he's just as weak as they thought. On top of that, his attacks are making the giant rodent even angrier. Park Hyo-sang on the other hand realizes that the way Hyson moves is beyond the capabilities of an average healer. Then he realizes that Hyson is purposefully trying to make it angrier so it can charge towards them. Even the two espers are shocked into confused laughter as Hyson leads the monster straight towards the two D-level hunters. The monster is on its way and Hyson gets very close to Park Hyo-sang so that he can whisper in the man's ear. From the intimidation he's receiving, and the anger in Hyson's face, Park Hyo-sang can tell that if he doesn't listen to the S-level healer, then he will die right there. He has heard Hyson being called many things. A beggar from Gaebongdong who doesn't know anything. An S-level hunter who is just 20 years old and the next Maria. But one thing is for certain. This man is the one who will kill them if they don't hurry up and give him an answer. The two men start screaming in terror right as the monster is inches from their faces, and Hyson decides that is enough self-reflection for them for now. Since they should have learned their lessons, he takes the monster out with a swift kick, sending it flying into the sky. Then before it lands, he uses poison steps to run up right behind it. This entire time when fighting boss monsters, he has had to be careful not to kill them. But now, fighting is way easier when he's not holding back. Now he can fight with his full strength, and thanks to that, this monster is even easier to kill than the goblins he ran away from in his third dungeon. The others are shocked that a healer can move so fast, and Park Hyo-sang is stunned in fear, now that he has realized that he messed with the wrong person. Before he can think more on it, Hyson appears right behind him and places a hand on the man's shoulder. Our MC stops the paralysis and the two men slowly start to regain feeling in their bodies. Despite that, Park Hyo-sang still stands motionless as the fact that they lost so fast starts to sink into his mind. His friend Kim Hyo-san isn't as sharp and looks like he's ready to fight Hyson, not realizing just who he's trying to pick a fight with. Park Hyo-sang has to stop the man before he starts something that he clearly can't finish. The two of them have lost and Hyson has completely ruined their deal, but it's obvious that if they jump him, they'll be the ones who are beaten up. Park Hyo-sang decides to stop with their thuggish ways going forward. It looks like his encounter with Hyson has scared him completely straight. While the two of them bicker, the Esper siblings come up to thank Hyson for his help. Our MC was amazingly strong, and he hasn't even bragged about it this entire time. He's also incredibly kind and decided to even take care of weaker people. All these things make them call him a hero, and Hyson can't help but smile slightly at the sudden praise. The three of them end up laughing as they leave the dungeon still praising Hyson. As they all leave the dungeon, Hyson sends the two back the money that was stolen from them by the two D-level thugs. He got the money from the two thugs, and sent it to the siblings immediately since it was originally taken from them. They try to convince him to take back the money since he earned it fair and square from tricking the thugs, but he refuses. Du Yuchen sighs and smiles as he admits that he has lost. Even if they continue to argue about it, Hyson is way too stubborn to change his mind. Even though that's the case, he just can't let them part ways like this. He gives Hyson a card for a company called the Umbrella Industry. Hyson feels like he has heard the name somewhere before, but he has no idea why they're giving him the card, until he sees the name of the CEO, Do Isu. The CEO has the same family name as the two siblings, which means that they are most likely related. Du Yuchen confirms that the person on the card is their father, which also means that these two are probably incredibly rich. The fact that he was so proud about the money earlier when these two were rich causes a lot of embarrassment to build up in him. He stands there in shame as the siblings leave the venue and head off, wishing him goodbye as they leave. Hyson eventually heads home as well and tallies up his loot from the one-star dungeon. He only managed to get 12 cores, and they are all weak since it's a beginner dungeon. This whole time, he has only ever absorbed black cores, which are cores that are extracted from poison monsters in dungeons full of poison. Regular hunters can't absorb them, but those are his cores of choice. This will be the first time that he absorbs normal cores, and according to V1, he has no limits to absorbing them. That also means that he won't have to exclusively go to poison dungeons when he needs to level up. The cores get absorbed quickly, and it was way weaker than he thought it would be. After a brief check of his status window, he realizes that he barely got any gain from absorbing those weak cores. But he also notices that he got a new skill called Commune. It allows him to communicate with monsters and also gives him limited communication options with sapient creatures. The skill must have appeared because of his close relationship with Pori, and it's also the reason why he could communicate with Huge Tiger earlier. Now his major problem is figuring out how he will continue to grow stronger. He's still weak and his progress is already slowing down, and he starts to consider illegally heading into poison dungeons again. He needs the black cores from poison monsters to grow since black cores have several times more ether than other cores. The amount of ether in black cores is so tempting that heavy experiments were once held to figure out how to use them, but they all failed. Because of that, black cores are treated as toxic garbage, and no one acknowledges them as a real power source. But for poisoners, black cores are their main source of growth, and it's because of them that they are able to grow so much faster than other hunters. Core absorption is the best way to improve a hunter's abilities, and since getting high-level cores is usually very expensive, most hunters can't progress in growth and end up staying at the level they were in when they first awakened. He has Dr. Jin to thank for having all this information, but knowing it all doesn't change the fact that his progress is just way too slow. The only thing other than a black core that could give him a significant boost in power would be the gold core they used to measure his power during the hunter exam. If he could absorb something like that, then he could definitely grow incredibly strong. But for now, there's no way for him to do that. Meanwhile, outside his house, two familiar faces knock on his door. He wasn't expecting anyone to show up at this time, and he opens the door to see the two referees from the hunter examination smiling back at him. They saw the news article talking about how he finished his first dungeon with style and decided to head over and congratulate him personally. Hasten greets the two men as they introduce themselves and congratulate him on becoming a level S hunter, but our MC is more interested in why the two of them are there in the first place. Pyo Hyokyu reveals that he is aware that Hasten's growth has slowed down dramatically, and for that reason, they have a lot to talk about over tea. They head inside and Hasten prepares the tea as well as some cookies and snacks for them to eat as they discuss. His sister isn't around and he wasn't expecting any guests, so they will be alone to chat for a while at least. With initial compliments out of the way, Hasten gets down to business and asks the two of them what they are here to say to him. Pyo Hyokyu asks Haisen if he is aware of the news regarding dungeons that have been appearing recently. Apparently there has been a surge in dungeons appearing that can't be managed by the Hunters Association or any guilds. In Sujindong, Changsindong, and Imedong, 3 different dungeons all appeared just yesterday, and because of that, a Code Yellow emergency warning was announced. Code Yellow is the third most serious type of warning signal, and the Double Gates incident that started Hasten's life as a hunter was also a Code Yellow. Thankfully, there were no casualties this time since the warning was more about the strange situation than of any danger. What makes this situation particularly strange is the fact that a monster came out of a dungeon. There are 2 types of portals, a dungeon and a gate. Dungeons are one-way portals that lead to another world filled with monsters, while gates are like doors that hunters can go into and monsters can come out of. Usually gates only occur when dungeons become overwhelmed with monsters, and in those situations, something known as a gate flooding occurs where the monsters charge out of the gate into the real world. But in this scenario, the monsters started coming out while the portals were still dungeons and not gates, which explains why a Code Yellow was announced, because of how strange of an occurrence this is. Thankfully, there was very minor damage and no casualties, but that is only because the dungeon is pretty weak. If it had been a 3-star dungeon, the damage would have been immeasurable. Because of how serious the situation is, the association is keeping quiet on the incident. But hiding anything won't solve the problem. Hasten knows that, and Pyo Hyokyu apologizes in that regard because even he knows that. But more importantly than that, the current Hunter Association can barely handle the situation because there is a shortage of labor at the moment. More dungeons have started appearing than there are people to close them, and with the worry that monsters can now jump out of each of them, it's starting to cause a serious panic in the hunter world. During all of this chaos, Pyo Hyokyu found out some interesting news. The Imperial Tiger was cured during the last hunter examination. The Imperial Tiger is a monster known for being in an irrecoverable state. Now only were the tiger's external injuries healed, but the poison inside the tiger was also removed, which is miraculous in its own right. The entire association went wild trying to find who healed the massive tiger that had been abandoned, and Pyo Hyokyu knew as soon as he found out that Haisen was the person they were looking for. Pyo Hyokyu went on to do more research on Hasen's abilities and what he can do, but all that came up was more and more praise. That only made him desire out MC more, and he finally decided to come over so they can introduce themselves. From what he knows, Hasen isn't associated with any guilds, and it doesn't seem like he's involved with any other activities either. Then Pyo Hyokyu asks Hyson what he thinks about poison dungeons. From the intel he has gathered, he knows that there is no one else more suited to take on those dungeons than Hyson. Hyson tries to cover himself by saying that a level S healer should be able to clear a low-level poison dungeon without any issues, but the truth is that the job is more than just a well-suited job for him. Poison dungeons are even easier for him to fight in than regular dungeons, but the question is, how did this guy find out about that? And why does he even need to work with him in the first place? If he decides to accept this request thoughtlessly, then he will end up getting dragged around by the Hunter Association. But he also hates seeing people getting hurt. For now, he needs to try and find a way to stand on equal footing with the man and find out exactly what he gains from this exchange. Pyo Hyokyu already prepared a reward for Hyson in exchange for his corporation and brings out the golden core from earlier. It's currently corrupted with dark ether that somehow found its way into the core after it was used to measure his ether abilities. At first, Pyo Hyokyu wondered if Hyson was the culprit of the corruption, but it's obvious that can't be possible. Hyson laughs along with the man, but he also knows that he is most likely the culprit. The dark ether inside the core was probably mixed in from him while it was measuring him, but if he gets caught as the person that damaged such an expensive core, then he will definitely become a slave to the Hunter Association. They were planning on getting rid of it, but throwing such an expensive core would be a waste even if it's corrupted. But Pyo Hyokyu somehow felt that Hyson would have some use for it. It's obvious that even though the man is talking calmly, he's trying to feel Hyson out and get a reading of his reactions. A gold core that has lost its abilities is usually just garbage, but he can just absorb the black ether together with the core all at once. So the fact that Pyo Hyokyu is giving him this means that he's directly asking if Hyson can use this core, since for most others, absorbing it would hurt them. The man's objectives are unclear, and right now, it seems that his main goal is purely to resolve his own curiosity, but that doesn't matter to Hyson at all. The gold core plus being able to legally explore poison dungeons is just way too good of a reward for him to turn down. The gold core reminds Hyson of the story of a woman with a pail of water. She put a single leaf on the top of the water as she handed it to a traveler in the hopes of helping him avoid a stomach ache. But the gold core is not like a pail of water, but rather it's like a storm in the ocean. Right now, all he can do is think about how strong he will become after absorbing the golden core. Unfortunately, right now there's also a mean right hook heading straight for his chin. The punch sends him flying back and immediately wipes the smile off his face. Jiho, the man who threw the punch, bends down to help him get up. Thanks to his deal with Yacha, he managed to secure these training sessions with Jiho in order to learn the skill known as snapback. Unlike what you'd expect from the usual people that frequent the black market, he's kind to all people. Recently, though, the reality that no one is more wicked than him has become clear to Hyson. Their training involves repeated beatings that end up with him on the floor. It's not an exaggeration to say that the man training him is stronger than any monster he has faced so far. As soon as Hyson gets back on his feet, Jiho resumes the training, moving so fast that it looks like he teleports away. Then in the blink of an eye, Hyson is sent flying again with a sharp kick to the face. At this point, this has gone from a simple training exercise to a one-sided beat down. From their sparring matches, Jiho can tell that our MC lacks the basic fighting foundation. At this rate, it'll be difficult for him to learn the skills necessary to learn snapback. Hyson is still determined to learn it no matter the cost. He made a risky deal with Yacha in order to learn it, so it would be a shame if that went to waste because he gave up. Hyson activates poison steps, and for a moment, Jiho is impressed and correctly guesses that this must be the skill he used to defeat the hyena. It's pretty fast, but it also makes Jiho think that Hyson should learn how to move his body again. Before our MC can land a hit, Jiho uses snapback on him, turning his dagger right back before it can land a hit. However, this brief demonstration is enough for Jiho to see the potential in teaching Hyson. For now, our MC has to learn basic movements and techniques in order to learn how to use the skills of a knight. They start with rigid body, which is a training method that's used to strengthen a knight's body. Hyson takes the opportunity to ask his new teacher how long it took him to learn his current skills. Jiho reveals that just the basic movements alone took him 10 years to master. If that's the case, then he's going to be very late to assist Kirill. As Hyson continues to practice rigid body, Bisu walks into the room right as Hyson was planning to take a break. So far, he can barely tell if he has made any progress. But for now, all he can do is try to make as much headway as possible. Bisu notices his troubled expression and decides to give him a hint. She tells him that there is something to Jiho's techniques. Every time the man uses his skills, Bisu can tell that there's a peculiar scent in the air. It's more like a feeling than a scent, and it's quite similar to the effects of the poison poppy. If it's similar to the poison poppy, then that means the abilities must be more like hallucinations. The mysterious movements could be caused by something else that can't be seen. Maybe Jiho isn't a knight after all, and he's actually an esper. Espers are hunters that make use of a force that can't be seen to perform unimaginable feats. Thanks to that little bit of intel, the last pieces of the puzzle start to fall into place. Hasten figures out that the abilities are probably harnessed by a multiple ability holder, and Ojiho must be using two separate abilities at once. The second ability he's using is probably telekinesis, and that was the hint he was looking for to figure out snapback. The problem now is finding a way to gain that ability in the first place. All Espers use some form of telekinesis in relation to their powers. It's a very simple ability, but it has countless uses. Knights are strong, but when going up against multiple enemies at once, Espers are easily superior. There's nowhere to see it in action better than in a dungeon beside an Esper. Right now he's partying with another group of hunters in a beginner dungeon, and one of them happens to be an Esper with the ability to control lightning. The man's name is Lee Yaichan, and he manages to kill a large group of monsters with a single attack. He's just a level C hunter, but his attacks are flashy enough to impress the rest of his party. The kid talks enough to give any hunter an earbleed, but he's known as the Rising Esper, who also delusionally sees himself as Hasten's rival. Although the current outing is pretty easy because of the guy, his constant yapping already makes Hasten want to go home. As Lee Yaichan runs off to go and fight off more monsters, Hasten takes a moment to talk with one of the other hunters in the party. Apparently their guild took a lot of effort to try and recruit him, and his abilities are as impressive as the look. The name of the guild is the Oranauten Guild, and the woman he's talking to is one of the seniors there, but it looks like she was respecting Lee Yaichan for a moment back there. That's because everyone in the party likes Lee Yaichan, and he seems to have a small fan club with him at the moment. They all cheer him on as he defeats the monsters, and that causes him to make his abilities even flashier to impress them more. It's a simple relationship, and they all look happy with it. Then the woman asks him if he has any plans after the dungeon raid. They are all going out to have a company dinner, and it would be great if he could join them. But he has to decline the invitation since he has to train with Ojiho after the raid. The woman is impressed by the fact that he has the motivation to train even after fighting in a dungeon. It's not healing practice though. It's the movement practice that Ojiho has been forcing him to master for several days now. As they talk, Lee Yaichan notices something and calls one of his other guild members to come and take a look. The man runs over happily to see what it is, but the giddy smile on his face is immediately replaced by a look of terror. It's a light coming out of the ground, and although it looks like an X, it's anything but treasure. The mood in the party changes immediately, and everyone runs to take cover. The hole in the ground is actually a door to a second dungeon, and they are a bit too late to take cover as the dungeon opens up, causing them all to fall into it. With no way to protect themselves, they decide to protect Haisen as their first priority. It's bad luck that they discovered this place when it was too late. The dungeon is starting to collapse, and people are falling into the hole one by one with no way to protect themselves. At this rate, everyone will end up falling to their deaths with no hope of survival. All the guild members who were happily chatting just a moment ago start plummeting to their deaths. Lee Yaichan is stunned to silence as all his guild members are gone, and he starts to cry as he realizes that their deaths might be his fault. But Hasten's stern voice pulls him out of his daydreaming. He runs past Lee Yaichan and encourages the Esper to go into the hole and chase them if he wants to save them. He shouldn't be in a daze right now when his friends are falling to their deaths right below them. If they didn't die on impact, then they can save all of them. Lee Yaichan watches as Haisen fearlessly dives into the hole to save his friends. He's scared, but the thought that someone who just met them today is fearlessly jumping into danger to save his friends pushes him to take a leap too. And he can't just stand by and watch while this is happening. At the moment, losing his guild members is 100 times scarier than whatever is in the hole. The two discuss how they're going to save them, and it's not going to be easy. For starters, Lee Yaichan can cast a shield to save them from the fall damage, but his limit is 4 people. As well as that, there are some that have fallen further than his range. Luckily for them, saving 4 people is enough while Hasten can get the rest. Our MC activates Exa and uses it to form stepping plates that he can use to activate poison steps in midair. Then he rushes in to save them all himself. He has only heard about second dungeons so far and has never seen one for himself. Because of that, he was slow to react when the dungeon initially broke open and everyone started to fall in. Most of them must have passed out from the impact of the dungeon collapsing, so they can't protect themselves from the fall. He tells Exa to spread the plates out wide so he can have more space to jump through. Since Lee Yaichan can catch 4 people, all he has to do is get the remaining 2 and they will be able to save everyone. He dashes through the air and manages to snatch the 2 who had fallen the furthest away from them. And he did it just in time since they are about to reach their destination. The atmosphere in the dungeon has completely changed after the collapse, and it's very different from how it looked originally. They finally make it into the second dungeon, and Lee Yaichan runs to check if Hasten is all right. Somehow, he's completely unscathed despite the huge fall they just took, and thanks to his quick thinking, they successfully managed to save everyone. The two he picked up are still asleep but thankful, safe, and alive. Their tearful reunion can wait though, since the dungeon monsters have already come out to say hello. They are harpies with a physical level of B and another level of B, and they have a difficulty level of 4 stars. Lee Yaichan considers the fight dangerous, but Hasten knows he should be able to take them out easily. One touch from Exa should kill them all immediately, and it'll be way too easy for him to take them all out at once. Lee Yaichan mistakes Hasten's quiet reading of the situation as the healer wanting to avoid direct conflict, and he decides to step up and fight while Hasten stays behind. Thankfully, before he can throw himself into a losing fight, the rest of his guild members wake up to support him. They first thank Hasten for saving their lives, then they tell him not to worry about the fight and just focus on healing them when they need it. Hasten decides to fold his hands and watch the fight, but he's worried that they may not be able to win. Despite the overwhelming odds against them, the group gets into formation and prepares to take on the Harpies. The first person to launch an attack is a level B Esper who fires strange cards into the sky before detonating them for a massive explosion. The sky is filled with fire for a moment, and people start to think that the second dungeon might be easier than they thought. However, despite the fact that the Esper used a majority of his strength, the Harpies are completely unfazed by the attack. Then they start coming in, and it's time for the real fight to start. The group is doing well holding up, probably because they have a lot of experience in dungeons, but it's obvious after a while that the fight is far beyond their abilities. There are too many monsters, and the Harpies start to take them out one by one. They're only being kept alive by his healing. The woman he was talking to earlier is the one he's healing at the moment, and she tells him that he should run away now that he has the chance. The fight is clearly losing, and it would be a shame if the world lost a powerful S-level hunter because of a double dungeon. Hasten, on the other hand, decides to do better than just running away by himself. He has been watching them absent-mindedly this whole time, but the job of a healer is making sure that people don't get hurt. The woman tries to stop him, thinking that he's just rushing into his death. From her perspective, the fight has already been lost, and Hasten running in there to fight is practically suicide. But our MC knows that giving up without trying is very laughable. On top of that, he knows that he will be able to win this fight. He long since judged that this would be an easy fight for him. The woman still doubts that there is much he can do in this situation as a healer. What they need now is a damage dealer, and she doesn't think he has the strength to take out these many monsters. Hasten agrees with her that healers tend to depend on their teammates a lot, and they mostly function as support roles. But right now, he's not just an ordinary healer. Then he throws Exa towards the Harpies, and it flies past the group of tired hunters, managing to hit one in the stomach with enough force to blow her into nothing. His initial attack only managed to kill a few of them initially, so he has to step up by himself and take them out on his own. He uses poison steps to close the distance and leap into the air and take out even more Harpies in the way. The other guild members can only stand and watch as he cuts through all the monsters in a matter of seconds. Even though he is very easily overpowering the monsters, there are just way too many of them, and at this rate, he won't be able to go home. Since he can't use Poison Rain in this situation, he tells Exa to hurry up and transform into something that will allow him to finish this quickly. The weapon turns into a shotgun, which is even more baffling for the other guild members as they watch him shoot all the Harpies in seconds with the gun. For a moment, the Harpies look like they're completely unaffected by the bullets, and it almost looks like the rest of the guild will have to step in to help. But Hasten tells them to calm down. If those were ordinary bullets, then it would be useless, but these are bullets fired by Exa, meaning that they just need a moment to take effect. As soon as the poison hits, all the Harpies start foaming at the mouth and falling from the sky. Hasten isn't doing so well either, and it looks like the effects of using something as powerful as the shotgun take a lot of ether out of him. This is an ability he can't use often. As he's trying to recover, a Harpy swoops in on him, but it's zapped out of the sky by Lee Yaichan, who's still going around calling himself Hasten's rival. But despite Hasten's overwhelming power, things aren't over just yet. And just as Hasten's ether seems to be running out, the boss monster finally comes out. It's a giant Harpy with 4 wings instead of 2, and it has a physical level of C and another level of S. Luckily, Hasten has just enough ether left to move just one more time, and that should be enough for him to finish this. He slashes his hand with Exa, spilling his blood on the ground, then leaps into the air towards the Harpy Queen. He gets right in front of her face and delivers a devastating blow, spilling his blood all over her and allowing him to activate the black ether from it, poisoning her with poison lethal enough to kill an A-rank knight. Thanks to Hasten's skills and quick thinking, he managed to defeat the boss and clear the dungeon. The reports will state that everyone survived, but it will also state that he only provided support and didn't actually fight. The members of the guild don't want to accept that, and they yell at Hasten for even thinking of asking them to do something so unfair. He did so much for them and then goes on to say that he doesn't want a reward, and that's something that the guild just can't accept. He explains to them that his abilities are way too strange, and he doesn't want them leaking out to the public. so keeping his secret is reward enough for him. All he wants is for them to not ask about who he is. They tear up at his nobility and want to keep arguing. But Hasten runs off, using his poison steps to get away from them before they can ask him more questions. And before they find out that everything he just said is a lie. From the outside, it looks like Hasten wasn't benefiting from this at all, but little do they know that he has already taken the biggest reward from the dungeon for himself. He absorbed the harpy's core after killing it without anyone noticing, and it gave him a huge boost in power. Of course, he couldn't tell them that he was actually incredibly greedy with his motives, so he made up a fake story and ran off as soon as he got the chance. On top of that, the harpy core also gave him a new special ability called Lion's Roar, which can seize the mind of his opponents by infusing his voice with ether. In truth, he benefited the most out of everyone on this expedition, and he's just lying through his teeth to save face. A few days after the second dungeon incident, Hasten heads towards a place called the Cleanup Clan. Inside, a man sits around a pile of scattered empty beer cans. They all taste awful, but this is all he can afford at the moment. The man's name is Yuk Cheolwan, and he's the Cleanup Clan's leader. His clan has just recently been granted the authorization to enter poison dungeons, and his hope is to find something powerful that he has been looking for. Unfortunately, poison dungeons are too dangerous for a single hunter to explore alone, and he has no one to go with. He tries calling someone from his younger days to see if they can help out. The two friends chat about how life has been for a bit, but then the subject of Cheolwan's cleanup clan comes up, and the man immediately turns it down. The business doesn't make nearly enough money to be sustainable, and there's barely any benefits to going into poison dungeons. Then his friend reminds him that the thing that he's been looking for this entire time, the golden sunflower, doesn't exist. He advises his friend to stop doing such a dirty job and give up on looking for something that doesn't exist. Then he ends the call. His friend's words are harsh, but he can't give up just yet. He still has reasons to look for the sunflower, even if he has to do this dirty job. As he's thinking to himself, a knock comes from the door. He goes to answer it, forcing a smile on his way, but his smile drops when he sees the person waiting on the other side of the door. It's Hasten, someone famous enough that everyone in South Korea knows of him by now. He's the new S-ranker who showed up and was acknowledged by the Imperial Tiger. People know him as the mysterious hunter who will one day surpass Maria. The praise is too much for Hasten, and he tells the man to calm himself down as he lets himself into the room. The man asks Hasten what he's doing there, but the reason should be obvious. He's there to join the cleanup clan. He doesn't want to join a guild because he hates their meaningless restrictions, and it holds him back. But with clans, there is a lot more freedom. For now, he just wants to work with someone who could potentially share his goals. Yul Cheolwan can't help but think that this must be some kind of dream. Maybe he fell asleep while drinking beer, and he's still passed out on the couch back at the guild. But this isn't a dream, and it's very much the reality. That reality becomes obvious as the two men head into their first poison dungeon together as a group. He's dressed up in full hazmat gear due to the poison dungeon's toxicity, but to his shock, Hasten has no protective armor. He tries to warn him to not carelessly enter a dungeon without protection, but Hasten assures him that it's fine. If anything happens to his body, then he will take full responsibility for it, so there is no reason for Cheolwan to worry so much. There's no way to stop Hasten when he's determined, and the two men enter the dungeon with different levels of enthusiasm. The dungeon air is very refreshing to our MC, and now Cheolwan can't even tell what's going on anymore, but he can't complain when he has an enthusiastic newcomer who is so eager to work. He hands Hasten a pickaxe to start harvesting materials with, but now isn't the time to mine. First, he has to get rid of the monsters that have started swarming around them. This time, it's a horde of evil horses, and they are all charging at them. Usually these horses are monsters that don't attack unless you cross into their territory first, and there are already at least 10 of them. While Cheolwan is scared, Hasten welcomes the attack as free experience points. The reason the horses are rushing towards them despite the fact that they aren't in their territory is because of the special liquid from the black market that attracts monsters. He poured some on himself before coming to the dungeon, and now, thanks to that, he doesn't have to hunt them himself. He kills off the horses one by one as they charge towards him, but unfortunately he's careless, and some get past him, running towards Cheolwan behind him. The clan leader isn't a coward though, and he's able to take them both out easily without any problems. Cheolwan asks Hasten if he is really a healer. He's way too skilled at fighting to just be an ordinary healer after all. Hasten thinks the clan leader is way more impressive, especially since he's not just a C level, he's actually a B level knight. It's strange that someone with this level of skill would dedicate themselves to harvesting dungeon byproducts. He must have some sort of deep backstory. Now with the distractions gone, gathering byproducts will be a lot easier for both of them. But before they can get to work, Hasten notices that the boss is observing them. It's really far away, so they have to focus to see it, but Hasten can feel its gaze. He tells Cheolwan to continue gathering alone so he can head out and check it out. Then he dashes off with incredible speed that even a B-level knight like Cheolwan wouldn't be able to pull off. Hasten keeps running towards where he can feel the boss's presence. And as he runs, he remembers his last conversation with Ojiho. After just a month of training, he has grown enough to just barely touch the man's collar. For most people, touching his collar would take over 10 years of constant practice and training. Now that he's thinking about it, it's almost embarrassing that he once thought Hasten had no talent. Now that he had increased in skill, Ojiho also had to increase the intensity of their training to something way more difficult. During that time, his teacher once told him that he had already surpassed the night thug that they saw in the black market from back then. But now, he needs to confirm his training and see what the dungeon really has in store for him. He finally finds the boss monster, and it's a humanoid-looking wolf monster, which will be perfect for him to use as a training dummy. It's a monster with a physical level of C and another level of D with a difficulty of 3 stars. The two square off against each other. But Hasten is almost too easily defeated by the monster with only one hit. He gets up and they go again, but once again Hasten is easily destroyed in combat. By the third round, Cheolwan had caught up to them, and he's standing by the side, watching the two fight. He's done gathering, and it didn't seem right to disturb their fight, so he just stayed by the sidelines. As they're talking, Hasten gets knocked out by a third punch, proving that hand-to-hand combat is way too much for him after all. There's an absolute difference in their physical level, and he can't overcome it through normal means. This fight definitely won't be possible for him to win without mastering Snapback. Hasten's talent and potential is unparalleled. It would have taken others 10 years to reach his level of skill, but it instead took only a few months. All of his talents are now above average even by hunter's standards, but he can't master Snapback with talent alone. The talent was created by Yacha, and it was intentionally made difficult for anyone to learn. Talent is only a basic requirement for learning Snapback. For now he's missing something, and he racks his mind to think what that could be. Snapback is more of an illusionary talent than a martial art, and the trick is blending the real body with a phantom. He can't do it without psychic energy, but his sensitivity to telekinesis increased after he absorbed the Harpy's core. At the time when V1 gave him the message, he had no idea what it meant, but now it just might be his key to Snapback. You can't learn it with just talent alone. To learn it, you have to understand its principles. Anyone who has seen their opponent use it has fallen into despair after witnessing the haunted martial art. But recently, he was able to react to Ojiho's attack, which means that he has at least gotten the hang of it. But having the feel for it is still far from enough. But no matter how impossible it is for a normal person, Hasten is Kirill's pupil. That fact alone makes him much different than everyone else. But if he can focus his strength, he should be able to do something amazing. The monster rushes at him with a mighty blow, ready to take him out once and for all. But to the monster's and Cheolwan's surprise, Hasten appears behind, completely unaffected by the attack. The dog turns and charges in again for another attack as Hasten smiles menacingly. He remembers once again what Ojiho taught him. He first has to take his stance and make sure that he can move comfortably. Then he has to aim for precision in his posture and focus on his speed and balance. Once he masters all these basic skills, the opponent's stronger attack will be reflected back to them. With all those principles mastered, Hasten successfully manages to use Snapback on the wolf monster, sending the killing blow straight back into its chest. Cheolwan can only stare in shock at the unrealistic technique Hasten just used. Thanks to that, the Cleanup Clan's first dungeon was very successful. There were no injuries, and Hasten came out stronger after finding a clue about Snapback. The two members continued to work together on the next dungeon raid, and even though permits for dungeons were hard to come by, after Hasten's entry into the clan, permits came rushing in like a landslide. That is definitely due to the help of the association's head referee, Pyo Hyokyu. The two of them continue to work together, and although Haisen is not yet sure whether the man is a friend or a foe, he hasn't done anything except be helpful to him so far. One thing that's for sure is that the man is definitely not an ordinary association employee. Pori had also revealed its existence to Cheolwan a while ago, when it cried to warn them about an approaching monster. He was almost killed by Cheolwan for appearing suddenly, but thankfully now they are close. Now they are in their next dungeon, and they are almost done clearing it out. The boss has already been killed, and Hasten wants to take the opportunity to ask Cheolwan about some things. Specifically, he wants to know why someone as capable as Cheolwan does this kind of job. Hasten can tell that the man is specifically obsessed with poison dungeons. It's almost like he's looking for something. After everything Hasten has said, Cheolwan realizes that he can't keep his secret for much longer. He asks Hasten if he has heard of the legendary flower. It sounds like it's some sort of fantasy, but it's a flower that is said to be able to cure any disease. Haisen realizes that he's talking about the golden sunflower. For something as miraculous as the rare flower, it makes sense that they would call it a flower that can cure any disease. Ordinary hunters would never be able to come across it, and some wouldn't even believe that sort of thing exists. But Cheolwon is certain it exists, and he has a reason to find it. There are two types of people who search for the sunflower: those who know of its existence and others who have no choice but to believe in its existence. Cheolwon has a wife who he was unfortunately unable to protect. She's currently in the hospital and he wants the sunflower in hopes of saving her. He went around to all kinds of dungeons looking for it and did all kinds of labor. Over time, his old clan members left and he started to even doubt if he could ever find it. Hyson cuts him off and asks him directly if he's talking about the golden sunflower. If that's the case, then the reason he hasn't found it is pretty obvious. Golden sunflowers die with the dungeon's boss, so they need to find it before killing the dungeon's boss. There are 3 types of sunflowers: the bronze, silver, and golden ones. The higher the rank of the flower, the more difficult it is to find it. Hasten has never seen the golden sunflower either, but he knows for a fact that it exists. Those flowers only appear in poison dungeons that are 7 stars and above in rank. Hearing all of that, Cheolwon tells Hasten to stop if he's just trying to give comfort, but Hasten assures him that it's true. Then to further prove it, he shows Cheolwon the bronze sunflower that he got from this dungeon. That is proof that the golden sunflower truly exists. Cheolwon can't help but break down as he realizes that all the things he had done so far, and all the work he had put in, was not in vain. The man can't help but get on his knees and scream in joy at the new information. Hasten sighs as he watches the man. His first impression of Cheolwon was that he was just an alcoholic hunter, but it's obvious now that he's a sincere and trustworthy person. He stretches his hand out to help Cheolwon stand up and assures him that the two of them will go looking for it from now on. Outside the dungeon in the Glory Guild headquarters, Gu Gun-ai is holding a meeting with his secretary to discuss the affairs of their organization. From what he's hearing, it seems like things are going well so far, but one thing is still bothering him: the fact that Cheon Hasten hasn't joined Glory Guild yet. A lot of time has passed since he was revealed to be a powerful S-rank healer, but up till now they still haven't managed to recruit him. Luckily for them, he still hasn't entered any other guild, but he's dead set on not coming to theirs. Gu Gun-ai smiles and decides that it's time to change their approach. He orders the secretary to stop sending people to his house and instead have journalists on standby. He will definitely have to do something if the media is talking about him. The secretary assures him that he will do just that and turns to leave, but Gu Gun-ai stops him and asks about Maria. The secretary assures him that Maria has just been preoccupied these days. That's unusual for her and a bit concerning for Gu Gun-ai, but he assumes that things will be fine. After all, she has never disappointed him before. Then his mind shifts back to Hasten. Plenty of other hunters have rejected Glory Guild over the years for various reasons. Some were arrogant and others were stubborn, but at the end of the day, they all came back to him. Last year, there were 3 exceptional B-rankers that passed the hunter's exam. Glory Guild was set to take one, while Bishop Guild would take the other 2. But the Bishop Guild hunters changed their minds and joined Glory Guild instead. It wasn't revealed to the public, but everyone assumed Glory Guild had done something in the background. It was around that time that the Glory Guild and Bishop Guild had a nosedive in their relationship. The Glory Guild had the power and money to bring anyone to their knees in front of them. Being worthless in this capitalist society is a good enough reason to be abandoned, and resistance against them is just proof that one has to adjust to their society. But for some reasons, Cheon Hasten continues to resist the Glory Guild, despite everything they can offer him. Does he want a genuine apology from the chairman himself? He should know that nothing good will come out of making Gu Gun-ai his enemy. He must have hit a wall in his growth by now, and his desire to get stronger should outweigh his pride. Gu Gun-ai is sure that eventually his desire to reach an S rank will bring him to Glory Guild. It's only a matter of time. The next day, Hasten walks along the street and notices someone very obviously following him. It's only one person for now, and they aren't doing a very good job of hiding. He waits until they are right behind him, about to touch him, then appears right behind them in an instant. He's sure that whoever this is must be someone from Glory Guild, and he has already told them to stop coming after him. The woman is shocked that he has some sort of illusionary abilities since this wasn't in the report she received. But he's more concerned with who she is and why she's here. She takes off her glasses and apologizes if it seems like she was following him. Then she reveals that she's Maria from the Glory Guild. That shocks Hasten a bit since he didn't expect Maria to personally come and try to recruit him. She apologizes for not informing him that she wants to see him, but the matter is really urgent. She wants to know more about him. Hasten takes a moment to grab her by the shoulders, then glares at her as he asks what exactly she's aiming for with this kind of trickery. There's no way that she just wants to know more about him, and there must be another reason that she's so interested in him. The two head to Gaebongdong Park, and Maria informs him that Huge Tiger broke its chains and managed to run away. That's the reason why she came to find him, because she knows that he's the one that healed it. But that doesn't explain why she came to find him. It's not like she just came to talk about how cool it was that the Imperial Tiger got to escape. Maybe they need someone to be a scapegoat for its disappearance. Maria assures him that isn't the purpose of her visit. She saw him heal the tiger, and noticed that he was powerful enough to even regenerate its core. As soon as she saw that, she immediately knew that he was definitely more powerful at healing than her. Thanks to that, a conversation between them would be beneficial to both of them as healers. Although her reasoning makes sense, he's still doubtful of her true intentions. Everyone in South Korea knows who she is, and although he can tell that her intentions are different from Gu Gun-ai, she's still a member of Glory Guild. He knows that his hatred of the guild could be narrow-minded, and maybe he doesn't know the full story, but the fact remains that she shouldn't have followed him. He points to the child playing alone in the playground. He always came to play in the park with his mom, and she would sit on a bench and watch him play. She also liked taking lots of pictures of him, so she carried a camera alone with her. Now that same kid came alone to the park, and there is no mother with a camera anywhere in sight. Earlier, when she talked about compensation, the question becomes, what kind of compensation can they give to a child that has lost his mother? After everything that happened because of Glory Guild's negligence, then she shouldn't have come to Gaebongdong just because she wanted to see him. Elsewhere, Cheolwan slams his hand on a table as he reads through an article on the internet. It's talking about Hasten and painting him as a powerful hunter that vanished and refuses to help people. Cheolwan stews in anger as he thinks about the kind of danger Hasten has been putting himself through. He can't just sit by and watch as people badmouth Cheolwan. It may not be much, but the best he can do is reply to these articles with comments praising Hasten and badmouthing Glory Guild instead. He sends a text to Hasten, assuring him that he shouldn't worry about anything, but Hasten has no idea what the man is talking about. Maria, who has heard enough of Hasten's words, stands up and decides to leave. He was right after all, and the reason she came was completely self-serving. Then she apologizes and starts walking off while covering her face with her cap in shame. All his words were completely true, and she couldn't make an excuse for herself. After all, she couldn't save any of the people that lost their lives while she watched. Her mind races back to the cries of people that called out to her as a hero. They begged her to save them and reached out to her for a miracle, but she couldn't save everyone. People blamed her for death that she could not control, till now she holds all that guilt in herself. She can't bear to forgive herself for the blood spilled because of her inadequacy. People have tried to console her by telling her that she truly can't save everyone, but she's someone who has the power to. She's a healer who can't even understand pain. As she walks away with her mind raking with guilt, Hasten runs over and grabs her hand, pulling her out of her spiraling thoughts. He tells her that her hand was bleeding, but when they look down at the hand he's holding, it's clean and uninjured. She pulls her hand back in fear and tells him to let go of her. She was told by the chairman to keep her self-harming a secret, but it seems like she became careless while overthinking earlier. Hasten wonders if he was imagining things earlier, but despite that, he can still see her bloody appearance underneath her saintly disguise. Later that evening, Maria left, and after what he said to her, her face went pale with shock. She left as if she were running away from something or someone. Hasten sits on the bench thinking about what could have gone wrong while the kid from earlier takes an iced drink beside him. The kid thanks Hasten for playing with him sometimes, especially after he lost his mom, but Hasten tells him that he just didn't have anything else to do. Then he asks Hasten if Maria from earlier is his girlfriend. Hasten denies it, but that seems to make the kid disappointed in him. They talk for a little bit more, then play before Hasten goes home. The next day, back at Glory Guild headquarters, a group of executives have a meeting with the head scientist. He wants to show them something that will definitely cause a commotion amongst them. It's the poison poppy, and he claims that it is something that will take Glory Guild on a new route. The others yell at him in shock for even mentioning something like that, but he tells them all to calm down. It's the worst illegal drug out there, but he has plans for it. Plans that can take Glory Guild to new heights. The others are clearly still against the idea, and one of the executives takes it upon himself to try and shut down the idea, but a cigarette flies through the room and explodes right in front of him. The owner of the cigarette puts another one in her mouth and tells him to stop raising his voice during a meeting. Gu Gun-ai, who looks very interested in the conversation, orders the man to sit back down and then tells the doctor to continue his presentation. The doctor gets straight to the point and reveals that although the drug is dangerous, the poison poppy is guaranteed to bring more benefits than drawbacks. The drug brings a greater reinforcement to healing abilities, and a good healer is already a very valuable asset to the guild. One of them asks if that means that they will be using the drug on Maria, but Gu Gun-ai shuts down that idea immediately. She's the symbol of Glory Guild, and giving her the poison poppy is too big of a risk. For now, they just need to find any healer who's fit for the task, and the perfect candidate is Yu Jin-won. They can lie to the association's vice president and tell him that they just want to strengthen the kid. It will also be great for their public image, since they will need to raid poison dungeons to get the plant. Most of the other executives still think it's too dangerous, but their top priority is ensuring that the internal stability of the Glory Guild is maintained. As they argue amongst each other, the chairman tells them all to keep quiet. Then he orders them to buy off all the poison dungeons as fast as possible. If another clan or guild bought them, they are to take it away from them and try their best to do this without Maria finding out. With the chairman's direct support of the plan, no one can object, and it's decided that they will commence the Poison Poppy plan. Back in the Cleanup Clan's headquarters, Cheolwan gets a notification that their poison dungeon requests are being rejected. The dungeons that no one would ever agree to take on were now being bought up by the district. Hyson immediately realizes that this is the Glory Guild, and once again, they are being a nuisance to him. He decides to call up someone that he knows will be able to sort out the problem for him. He picks up his phone and calls Pyo Hyokyu, who answers almost immediately. The man is surprised that Hyson would call him first, but he seems more than happy to have a conversation.